Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. Today on our first real episode of 2024, the boys are back in town as we discuss Michael Mann's Ferrari. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp and the good Nicolò Grasso joins the show to not only discuss if Ferrari is worth the wait considering it's Mann's first real film in 8 years, but we also discuss how it might impact Mann's career going forward and what it says about the current state of the industry. Thank you so much for listening to ClapperCast. Please make sure to follow, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Now let's get to our review of Michael Mann's Ferrari.
Two objects cannot occupy the same point in space at the same moment in time. The corner races at you. You have perhaps a crisis of identity. Am I a sportsman? Or a competitor? If you get into one of my cars, you get in the win. Slow.
Okay, and now to discuss Ferrari. I think there's no better way, Jack. The only reason we're doing this on the podcast is because we made a bet, or we made a deal, I guess, rather a transaction. We don't really need to talk about my side of that, but we're here talking about Ferrari for your side of it. So, Jack, we have a new Michael Mann film. Take us away. What were your thoughts on Ferrari?
Well, Clapper has had Clapper and then in sort of a lineage to me have had a strange sort of relationship with Michael Mann because we've done quite a heavy viewership of the director's filmography, especially on Uncut Gems. Not so much on ClapperCast, but definitely on Gems. We've done with Black Cat, they've done Heat, they've done a few other things. I think they've done Collateral and so on and so forth. And
Miami Vice.
Yeah, we did the Miami Vice, we did the director's cut of that, and then we did the director's cut, which was basically a bootleg version of Black Cat, which best not probably go into any more detail of that. But we've definitely had sort of a soft spot for Michael Mann, especially with the Wachowskis and then Tony Scott as well. So it's quite a nice, especially William Friedkin as well, and the other filmmakers really aren't here or aren't able to make films at that degree now. So this has been since 2015 we've had a theatrical film from Michael Mann. 2024. It's crazy. So going into this, the hype is sort of unreal as a stan. I'll put myself forward for. The last film we sort of watched on his behalf, Black Cat, the theatrical version anyway, I think we were all very much lukewarm on. Didn't even get a release in Australia, most of Asia. Died of death. So this was a film 30 years in the making. Has gone through massive rewrites. Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman, and Uma Rapace, and now to the Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz starring. Obviously, Nick went to go see it in Venice. Now, don't hold that against him. I'm gutted. But I've been waiting a long time for this because I think for a passion project from a lot of people can be quite hit and miss. But I think especially from a clinical director, someone who is quite passion-full, if that's a word, is Michael Mann, who's sort of notorious for picking and choosing stories, very much similar to Terrence Malick, obviously different filmmaker entirely, but similar sort of stature in pumping stuff out. So the hype was unreal. I can't quite understand a lot of people's reaction to this, including perhaps one person in here, maybe two of you. We'll have to get into it. This was worth the wait for me, which is quite frightening to say because I went into this knowing that a few people would say it was quite cold. It's a little bit strange. It's not necessarily Michael Mann-esque, and I agree to that extent. It's not the clinical type of productions you've seen even in the likes of Miami Vice, perhaps, or even in those sort of lesser well-regarded features. It's nowhere near a Heat. It's a different film to that. The film it's closest to, I find, is like The Insider, in that everything's happening, but very little happens on screen in terms of film that's bubbling up. But I feel like I'm the person who watched this and sort of got what he was getting at, Michael Mann, and I'll go into that a little bit, but this film's not necessarily about a man who wants to win a race. I think this is about Ferrari. There's three stories here about the name and what it means to be a Ferrari. The first one is his relationship with his son, both sons in that case. The second one is a relationship in maintaining who he is with his wife as Ferrari, as well as himself. And the third sort of conversation is what is Ferrari as a company. And I think three sort of strands of the story intertwine quite wonderfully. I think it was a very engaging feature throughout. The sound design is immense. I think you can tell that it's a very much restraint type in budget. It looks like a 90 million type of film. I think that's more beneficial, that he doesn't have to go and do crane shots or anything sort of silly or the mundane is here undoubtedly, but it's very much a restraint type of feature. There's one thing missing in it which sort of really upset me, but I'll get into that later. It's like a sort of a genre convention of Michael Mann. But I felt like I connected this entirely. I don't really necessarily see the issues of other people in terms of character development and maybe performance, but I was sort of spellbinded in this. I think I came away with this and thinking that ultimately a film about cars or racing is as linear as the actual race itself. You start and you hope to finish, and whoever gets there first wins. And ultimately, it's about the context and the sentiment of what goes into that linear story and what makes it worth it. The likes of Ford v Ferrari and other films of its caliber throughout it. Le Mans or Le Mans. Sorry for those the French out there. I do apologise. Le Mans, the Steve McQueen film, is very similar to this in sentiment, but it's a lot more than just about a car racing. And I think Michael Mann really got it here. There's blood, sweat, and tears, and there's an engine, and there's a stoicism with manufactured about cars. I think it echoes really well into its characters. I'm gonna have to pick a bone with you, Casson, about Adam Driver, because I think we'll have to go there when you talk about it. But it was interesting to read read Nick's essentially Nick's review, then go into see what Carson, because you saw it in October, Carson. No, November. Sorry, November or maybe October. Nick, you saw it in September, and I've been the lone wolf here. I watched it this morning. I know I shouldn't do that. We have this chat all the time, Carson. I should do it in the morning, but for my sins. But I got this. I was utterly compelled throughout this, and 2 hours and 10 minutes genuinely flew by. I've had a lot of fun in the cinema the last few years, but this as a cinematic experience just got me. I've waited so long for this, and very much like the Matrix Resurrections in a certain type of hype, in the fact that there's a lot of me that wanted it to be great and allowing it to be good, and I had a lot of time to develop with that other film in terms of what the context of that film was. This I could watch this any day of the week. I think it's a perfect type of just on and off, and there's nothing in terms of like underwhelming about that. I could watch this anytime, like Collateral, like Miami Vice, like Black Cat, which I previewed this afternoon as well in preparation for this, just to see if there's been any sort of change in tone. But I know I've been not very brief there, but yeah, I loved it. It would be in my top 10 of the year. Not upper echelon, but this was exactly what I wanted, and I'm hoping, because I saw this on Twitter the other day, this might just be the tick now of just in a twilight year of let's make a film every 3, 4, 5 years now, Michael Mann. Let's get back into the rhythm, mate. Because almost a decade out, I think there's been a lot of frustrations, and I think it perfectly gets back onto that cinema screen. So I really enjoyed it, really, really did. I'm not necessarily sure what you two are going to say now, but whoever's next, I'm listening with hot printed ears.
I can go quickly because I think it's important to talk about expectations here. There's a Barbenheimer almost dichotomy, I would say, between like the ClapperCast and the Uncut Gems group of filmmakers and group of films and group of tones. There's crossover for sure, and not that either side is bad, but like Michael Mann, I would say, is firmly on the Uncut Gems side, as you mentioned. Just someone I don't have really any connection with. I agree the highs are very high. Collateral, Manhunter, we'll talk about them towards the end, but like some very, very big highs in this filmography. But I can't say like personally, Michael Mann, I really care about him as much as really anyone else. He's not a Ridley Scott to me, where I'm going to be there drinking the Kool-Aid every single time. So I walked into this, and I've seen it twice now. I rewatched it last night just to have a fresh take on this. And I think it's a good film. I am definitely more mixed than you. I definitely have issues with the story, the narrative. I see what you're saying about it wanting to capture all these different sides of Ferrari, and I think that's good enough. I think specifically with how it builds the third act and the climax, it just feels too separated for me. And I think Adam Driver, will get to him, as you mentioned, genuinely the worst performance of his career. I don't know how you can sit there, especially in the bigger moments, emotional moments, and not just be like taken aback by how bad he is in this movie. But there are definite highs here. I think it is a worthy exploration of the name of the man. And Penelope Cruz, I don't think she's been mentioned yet, is giving one of the best performances of the year. I think she is phenomenal here. The sound editing, as you mentioned, the first time I watched this, it was off my FYC DVD, and the TV, I watched it like 2 a.m. for some reason, and I had to keep turning down the audio whenever the racing comes in because it's just this magnificent roaring engines. And there's some fun stuff behind the scenes of how he got a lot of the sounds of the cars. The racing is really engaging, some thrilling, haunting moments of destruction of human bodies, I'll say. It works. It definitely like works. I'm definitely positive on the film. I just don't know if it comes together for me as much as I would want it to say it's like one of the best of the year, but I'm definitely positive. Nick, as not Jack mentioned, you saw it at Venice. What were your thoughts on it?
I saw it at the world premiere. A very rare instance where I actually don't go to a press screening, but because it was like, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself. Life was good. Michael Mann was coming to lead it. I was like, I'll do it. I'll see Michael in the flesh. I managed to get a nice little seat, like the row in front of like the whole balcony where the actors and the crew are, and I was very excited. And then this very weird Italian lady sat next to me, and she just started complaining about the movie before it even started. And she was just like, "Oh, I hate when Americans make movies about Italy because they just don't get it. Like House of Gucci, like fucking that movie." Like she went in ready to hate the movie, and I went in like ready to love it. And it was amazing, like during the film, whenever she would just like scoff at the movie, whenever there was something very stereotypical about Italy, she would just go like, just, "You see this? This is what I was talking about." So it was a very memorable experience in that sense. But I will say that I enjoyed the movie. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. In a way, this is a perfect movie from the 80s transplanted into the 2020s in both the best and worst ways. I think the best ways are what we talked about with the action and the way all of the racing is shot. I think some of the melodrama really works. Penelope Cruz's performance is just so heightened. I think it's probably the only like generally perfect part of the movie, together with like the camera work during the racing. But what doesn't work for me is just the way the dialogue is written. There's so much exposition. I think there's like a couple lines of dialogue that are repeated like 2-3 times. "Oh, come on, you don't remember when I went and this happened 20 years ago." It's like something like that. It's like, yeah, no, we get it. You've said it already, Adam. Just keep going, keep going. I think the female characters in this film are horrendously written. I think Penelope Cruz is like a rare instance where the performance is so good it makes you forget what she's actually doing. And I think if they had like Numi Rapace, which honestly I really like her, but I think having her in this role, you would have noticed like, oh, there's something's not working here, which is
Agreed.
exactly what happens with Shailene Woodley. I'm just kind of like, okay, she's this woman who says a couple of things to be like, "No, see, I'm strong and independent," but then she does nothing throughout the movie. She's just there to be the mother of the other child. I didn't find that character, not necessarily the performance, just the character convincing in a way. Uh, Sarah Gaddon, I love her. I think she's just a delight. I've heard her talk. In person as well, and she has like a terrific mind, and to see her wasted in a role that's literally just the pretty blonde, the fiance of one of the racers. I was just like, I was hoping more from that. And that's like when it started to dawn on me, the longer the movie went on, I was like, they're really not going to do much with what they have in the script. Like I didn't feel like this was pushing forward anything particularly new or unique to the genre of like these stoic, silent men who are very haunted by their past. And most importantly, I completely agree with you, Carson. I really, I was a bit in denial when I first watched this movie. When it came to Adam's performance, I was like, Adam Driver's, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's fine, you know. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, man, there's so many sequences, and that's also, to be honest, probably a problem with the direction, I guess. It was just like, holy shit, like this man just saw someone's car just flip 10 times in the air, crash and burn, the rider is dead, and Adam Driver is just completely like stoic, still like not reacting in any way. I was like, what? What's happening? Like in the first part of the movie when there's the first accident, I don't know if you guys remember, like that part was like, what? And he's like that almost entirely throughout the movie. I was like, I don't get it. And then he has like the big moments where he has to be very loud and put on a little bit of an accent that comes and goes. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I really wish I loved this movie way more. It was very, I was very happy that when it came out, I was like, yeah, everyone that's going to love this movie will love it. And I'm happy that happened. I'm happy there's no like disappointment in that sense because everyone got what they wanted. I just wish I could belong in it. I went in hoping it would be more of a The Insider, of a Miami Vice, like that period of Michael Mann. And I do genuinely think this fits with Black Hat or Public Enemies, where there are moments of greatness in it, but the overall package, I'm like, it works, but gets you to the finish line, but it's, struggling all the way.
I'd love to interject there if I could do, because
Yeah.
I don't know how you excuse me. I don't know how you two would go against this, but this is my opinion of this. I find that Michael Mann works on an incredibly visceral level throughout his work, and I think, as someone who is a stan, is a fanboy, let's say, if those terms are not even outdated now, I find that it's probably the one thing I find that's quite a detriment to him as a character, but also as a filmmaker with a sensual touch, and that there's just it's so visceral to a point that I think he thinks, well, my audience are on the same page as me, and that might be fair enough. But when it comes to an emotive level, I think you're playing a very difficult game, because if you don't set up beats correctly, I think you can leave your audience wondering, but also you can leave your characters and your story and your narrative slightly underwhelming. I think he's done it a few times. I think when you look at something like Heat, when you see Al Pacino do excuse me, I'm tongue tied there, does what he does on screen, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, well, it's just Al Pacino on screen. I think you then read the subtext of it, and he says on the Christopher Nolan thing about Heat, like, I did Vincent O'Hara as someone who was on cocaine. And I think when you see it in that vision, it works. But when you look at it on a straight visceral level, I think you look at someone he's just overperforming. And here, very much like a few instances throughout his filmography, I think he leaves the character to develop as a sort of a second-hand shorthand with him and Driver, and then accept the audience to understand it, which is sort of like the tonal opposite to something what like Terrence Malick would do. Terrence Malick would have a character on screen, and instead of letting an audience figure out or to gel with a certain character just on an external level, he'll give them an internal monologue on screen through narration, and then ultimately you're watching something without having to think. And I think these are two polar opposites of filmmakers in a way. I just bring it up as an example, and just as just to use it as someone to oppose. I think Michael Mann works on a far too visceral level, and this film for me completely is that. There's quite a few things here I would agree with you on there, which I'll completely just throw my hands up and agree. The number one about the stoic thing is that if you read about Enzo Ferrari, like, I think he said himself, I mean, granted, this film actually quotes certain interviews he did in 1988, the day of his death, the year of his death, sorry, in a monologue when he talks to Penelope Cruz about the death of Dino. He says a certain line in it that it's in all the trailers, that the father something. That's literally verbatim of that sequence. So to me, I find that's a very strange idea about a screenplay taking quotations and then remixing them in sort of contextual dialogue. That's a very interesting take to do that, although, again, you have to then be on his level and go into it. But he says himself, Enzo Ferrari, that he had to build a wall. He says it in the film. Again, he says that in an interview in the 70s after he got into Formula One with, I think, is it Genis Villeneuve? I'm going to say Villeneuve, but we don't do that anymore, Carson. That's getting too much into somewhere we want to get into. But I think he said it himself, where he built a brick wall up because he stopped wanting to care about these people who were dying. But the film doesn't acknowledge that at all until a portion with through the film, and it's an offbeat comment with Shailene Woodley where It doesn't get that texture. Again, the film only mentions Dino's death a year before, but he doesn't actually say it in the film at all. It says it on his tombstone. I think if you would have known that before the film even started, if it's through um, uh, narration or if it's through on-screen text, I think you can get that identity and that texture once again of grief, because we're just allowed to figure out on screen. If we had known going into that Penelope Cruz is grieving, I think that performance is then, again, same with the Al Pacino thing, that it gets on a second elevated level. As we see it now, it's good. It's very good. But once you have that knowledge going into it, I think that material then gets elevated to a point where, oh, I see now. I see it. But I think Michael Mann wants you to figure that out. And it's a detriment to his style, because here, oftentimes, and I completely would agree with you here, you're watching two people argue on screen. And really, it comes down to that core of literally one person arguing and another person arguing. And you don't get that sort of purgatory in between it and that fire. And again, that sensitivity of emotion and emotive prowess. You just get people screaming. And I think this one turn off is just like, okay. And then we watch someone go out who is also dealing with his own grief, and we don't seem to get any context to it. And I think one great sequence is when he goes to visit the grave. I think that's just. I think if that, to me, I'm not. This is not against you two at all. I just think that because Nick, maybe more so than Carson, of what you've said about being into Michael Mann, I would have gone like you, Carson, if not a little bit like Nick, if I didn't get pulled in with that scene where he visits the grave in sort of the first 20 minutes. And he sits there and he has a little conversation and he breaks down. And this is where I think you might go with your Tommy Wiseau thing. And genuinely, in 6 seconds, he then goes back deadpan. And I think that's grief. That is someone who has internalized himself to accept that the barrier is now back up. He's shown, and I think it's a very much a male thing as well, which this film doesn't get into, and I think it should do, about the sensitivity.
An Italian thing as well.
Yes. But I think predominantly it's a very much age type of male where that's it. I'm not showing anything else. He breaks down in front of his son in his grave, and then just goes back in. And he goes, "But I don't ever see your face," and it gets back to reality. From that moment on, I was glued, because I sort of was in touch with the idea of what he was doing. That being said, I don't think Michael Mann gives enough credit or even a little bit more allowance to his audience to even feel that out. And I think it comes down to that procedural crime thing inside him, where it goes by clues, and it's sort of weirdly glued into his mannerisms as a director, his sensibility, and the fact that I've let loads of clues here. You figure them out. Well, we're not playing fucking Cluedo here. I'm watching a 2-hour film. Give me something. And I think I would agree with that. And I think it comes down Daniel Day-Lewis in The Last of the Mohicans. I think both characters in Miami Vice. I think Dillinger in Public Enemies. They're all there, and they all have the same somewhat lackluster issues. And I think it's him, how he writes these stoic quote unquote characters, but really they're all damaged. But he wants you to figure that out and meet him in the middle. And to me, it's like, just give it a little bit more credence. But that's where I would see it. I don't know if you two would agree with that, but that's sort of my identity with the issues there.
I will say I agree. I wish there were more scenes like that. There's just, I mean, I'm not the type of person that's like, "Oh, I can follow dialogues." It's just, there's just way too much talking in this movie, just way too much talking. And honestly, the scene that you mentioned, what I really loved about it, when he goes to the grave and you see like the facade breaking down and then just boop, going back up again, because you can't show yourself to be weak. There's the thing, everything. No, that's not what a man does. Like we've known men like that. I know, especially like in Italy, there's this whole culture about that. That's still very toxic, especially when you go further south. Like this film is set more in central Italy, but then it's also juxtaposed with Penelope Cruz going to the grave, and she's lacking that extra step, to process the grief in the way that he's trying to do. You totally see that they're two like separate islands. They're not a couple. They're not together. I think like that works brilliantly. But it's just like one scene early on, and then there's a lot of scenes of just people talking. I was thinking about that, like when you were talking earlier, Jack, just about all of this. I was like, yeah, why do the other movies work so much? Even something like Miami Vice, which was kind of hated back when it came out. I'm like, well, because there's a lot of moments of lyrical beauty where it's just the music and the visuals, the acting, and no dialogue, no nothing. And it's Jamie Foxx in the house taking a shower. The two on the boat, speedboat, going to dance and drink mojitos. Like, there's a lot of those moments in Miami Vice, and even in some of the other movies. Heat has a bunch of them. This movie really doesn't, which I think is a shame. I think it should have done the opposite, probably. It should have actually stripped back a lot of more biographical elements. And there was a bit of it's called a controversial tweet recently that came out on X about freaking May December, and like, oh, the guy that played him, that like the guy, one of the main inspirations for the story, said that he should have been consulted and blah blah blah, which is a whole separate topic. But someone said, oh, one of the worst things you can do for a biopic is to have like people directly involved make it. And boy, wouldn't you know that actually one of the people that helped produce the movie and that a strong help in making it was the son, the actual like the bastard son, you could say, of
Philippe.
Ferrari. He was also in the at the premiere of the film and everything. So
He's the SEO of Ferrari, though. He's pretty much like the top of Ferrari now, isn't he?
Yeah, you can't get past it probably to make a movie like this, which fair enough. But also, like after watching the movie and figuring this out, I was like, oh man, I'm thinking about so many scenes here where like he's just the cutest little boy. He loves his daddy. Daddy's super nice to him. Mom is amazing. Mom's portrayed like an angel. Fuck Penelope Cruz. That woman was sick. She had a freaking revolver in the house. She was ready to shoot Enzo. It's like, holy shit. Okay, it kind of recontextualizes some things, which have been very controversial here in Italy. Like, this movie has not been taken well in terms of how it portrays Italians, in terms of the fact that it's primarily about Italians with an entirely like foreign cast, which I don't really give two shits about, to be honest. What I don't like are the accents. I could have done without the accents. Go full Napoleon. I don't care if they have an American accent or a British accent, and then they meet the British and they all have the same accents. I don't care. Just do it like Napoleon. Instead, in this movie, you have like these weird accents that keep coming and going. I don't know what Shailene Woodley was doing. At least the pronunciations are good, It's just like, oh well, at least they say like Giovanni instead of Giovanni or something, which is how much you always get. Federico, but no, it's commendable in that sense. But just find it lacking. More lyrical, more poetic.
I will say I respect this film just because I feel like we're all on like very different wavelengths with it, which I think is like a kind of a testament to the film. Because like, not to push back, because I did say Adam Driver is terrible, and I do think he is, but like I think his stoicness works so well. And that's like the one time where I think this works, and I think that whole like him putting up a wall, I kind of disagree. Maybe it's because it was my second watch when I just watched this again, but like I thought that was handled very well. I thought that revealed itself very well. I think it's also quite obvious, like as he's watching these people literally die and he has no reaction, I think that carries enough of a weight to kind of propel you as an audience member to be like, something is up with this guy, because that's not a normal human reaction. I think that's very purposeful. I don't think it's a lack of like insight by Mann or anyone involved. I think the stoicness, like he does have a presence to him, I will say, where he's on the sidelines of the race or whatever. You do get a sense of like, okay, he's here. Like there is a sense of weight there. For me, it was the biggest issue was his bigger moments. Not even like the crying at the grave, but specifically like in the arguments, as he has to yell in this accent that goes in and out. And I don't give a fuck about accents, to be clear. I really do not care. But like truly, he goes from Kylo Ren to Tommy Wiseau to whatever his name was in Gucci. Like it's in and out of so many different performances that it really just bothered me. I think that's like where I'd say his issues are. But I kind of disagree with both of you in the fact that I think the stoicness and I think that emotional journey of grief from both him and Penelope Cruz, I think that like argument about it is also just like kind of the best scene of the film, to be honest. Like I think that plays very well and effectively. I think that's probably the one thing the film does like emotionally right. I think that's like the most impactful part of the film. So I don't know. I guess I disagree with you both there.
I get it.
I think stoicism is interesting, Adam Driver, because it's interesting to look at his filmography, and he's doing essentially what the Leonardo DiCaprio of his time did. He's working with auteurs and like Terry Gilliam. He's worked with Michael Mann. He's worked with like Spielberg. It goes on and on and on and on. And, he's done the Star Wars. He's done everything, and he's barely like 45. And I think it's interesting to look at an actor at that point and see where they've developed And when you look again with the Coen brothers as well, when you watch him at Inside Llewellyn Davis and you watch him something like this, which is a 10-year difference, 2013 to 2023, it's interesting to see how he sort of curated and contained his career in the sense of very, very powerful embellish moments of like aggression. I think you're right. I think they're mostly throughout his throughout his filmography. Here, I don't think he does anything essentially new. But I also, again, to what Nick said, I don't think Michael Mann is doing anything new here. I was slightly preoccupied with this because when you look at Michael Mann's textures in his film, and I think so. One thing I agree with what Nick said is that I think there should be a few sequences here, and I'm just talking about like seconds here, like 10 seconds here. There, Ford v Ferrari, the James Mangold film, which is like 7 years after this, in context of the actual story of Enzo Ferrari. There's one scene where it perfectly depicts Italian culture to me. I mean, I'm someone who has visited like Rome, Venice, again, like wife's gone to Florence. I adore that country too. I'm not just saying because I've got an arsehole here from Italy or anything, but I adore Italian culture. I find it like a second coming to a Yorkshire person as well, where they just say what they feel. They're very right wing, some of them, which is dangerous, but they very much have a very interesting history, which is very recent as well, since the 30s and 40s, and a lot. It's a very interesting thing. Which this film again, he was vilified by the Nazis, put it into his wife's name. There's something interesting to talk about there. It doesn't go into it. Granted, that might be in the Wikipedia section, but when you watch the Ford v Ferrari, when the Americans via Henry Ford II go to Enzo Ferrari and he's smoking, that scene, there's 9 Italians in there, all in black suits, all with black sunglasses on, all indoors, just smoking, and the room fills up with sweat, testosterone, and smoke. And you undoubtedly get a feeling of texture, which Michael Mann has done multiple times before in rooms, in greys, in blues. I mean, Harmony Korine, granted, it's probably not the best person to secondary source, but his favourite film is Miami Vice because it has that texture, it has that neon lit identity where you can smell that film, you can taste it, you can smell the cigarette ash in the nightclubs, you can smell the vibrant of cocaine in that nightclub in the beginning. I don't think you get the feeling here. It's very clinical. I think it's a testament to try and identify what Enzo Ferrari was as a person, but ultimately not understand what he was up against. It's all well and good crafting a film for an identity to revert back to its main lead character, but then you have a lack of mise en scène, which is interesting because I can't think of a Michael Mann film where the mise en scène wasn't absolutely perfect, to a testament of building a characteristic towards its towards its characters. Everything was then revoked back into building substance through style, building through some style. The end of Heat, the entirety of Miami Vice, I think echoes of Public Enemies is where then it begins to fall out. And I think Collateral is one that perfectly captures that essence of darkness and digital filmmaking. That isn't here for me. And the other thing that frightened me as well, there's only one other film where it's engaged with greenery, which is Last of the Mohicans.
Mm-hmm.
And I weirdly think them two match up quite well in the sense of, do you look at one character who's very stoic, has a mission to do it, will do it at all cost, loves his family, but is who's going essentially against a secondary nation and has to get to be on top. Not comparing Daniel Day-Lewis to Adam Driver or anything like that, but I think the sentiment and the ideas of both films are wildly interesting to be compared and almost work parallel. But again, those two films for me are the two lacking, and I like Last of the Mohicans. I love Last of the Mohicans. It's like my sister's favorite film. So that's how far Michael Mann goes back in my family. We're like twosies. No, I'm joking, but I do find that there's a sentiment there that this film lacks a texture, and even when you get into the race itself, and you get the flashing lights, and he's talking to the people, and you hear the sound design, and you hear the raw. There's no smoke. There's just this digital effect on the screen that looks almost like we're looking into a world. It lacks a human, organic, authentic touch. That whole thing you should barely be able to hear what he says. Just add a little bit more texture to the environment and lead it up. And then when they go driving around, we get a little bit more of there, but it's too clean, it's too clinical. And I think it's an idea that's followed Mann since 2009 with Public Enemies, especially after that with Black Cat, and then with this, all three of them have a lack of setting to be in partnership or in lieu with its characters. That's just my opinion on it. Having been a fan of his filmography, I don't necessarily know where that comes from. I don't know if that's a director who is deciding to go the James Cameron way or that sort of identity and to go through digital filmmaking, because they were two. Michael Mann and James Cameron were massive pioneers of Blu-ray. I mean, they were going to demonstrations in 2008, 9, 10 in Singapore to show the films that they were doing in the Blu-ray sphere. Perhaps it's that, I don't know. I read Jakub's review of this. Jakub Flash, the host of Uncut Gems, and he damned this film. And it's interesting that how he looks at this, and it's like a director sitting on a park bench. I'm going to try to quote this, talking to the viewer how to do a sports racing movie, but just, and it's as abrupt and simple as that, but not actually doing anything with it. I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, but I understand where it's coming from. Perhaps that's the 10-year difference, but for me, I can see that 10-year difference in a person then trying to find maybe the line again, the racing line, to try find that, get back on it. He needed those 10 years out to sort of redefine himself. And I'm a massive proponent of, if you leave an industry for far too long, I think you can forget things. You can forget that shorthand, that secondhand. And perhaps here that may be there. Maybe I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, so maybe I'll again concede to that slightly. But I get back to the point. I find a lack of texture here, but then it for me personally, I find that the clinical nature of its character study that more than makes up for that. But again, if you're going for the visceral here, there's sort of an oxymoron relationship, which I think for a viewer who goes to the cinema quite a lot, who watches very highbrow cinema, like the both of you two, who watches plentiful of auteurs each day, who's got incredible amount of cinephile ability to read film. I can understand why this perhaps wouldn't even pop up for you. I can imagine this would just be flat. So again, not to speak for both of you, but that's sort of sentiments I do. Again, just no texture. But again, I find other things that more than make up in some ways for me.
One thing I find very interesting, I don't think Mann probably cares, and he's been working on this film forever, is that when this film was made, it was planned to go to streaming, which I find like a very odd choice, and odd like factoid that it was going to go to Showtime, and then they sold the rights after it was made. So like, I don't know if that has anything to do with how it is viewed when you're creating something for the small screen compared to the theatrical screen. Again, Mann doesn't strike me as someone who's like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever. Like, he clearly has a passion for this film and passion for filmmaking, but I don't know if that plays into it at all. Just a thought, I guess.
I was slightly, again, excuse me, I was slightly worried watching this, because once you see Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz, there really isn't much else there in terms of depth, and there's not really much there in performance. There are small snippets of Jack O'Connell, Patrick Dempsey, Shailene Woodley, Sarah Gordon, as you said, and there's a few more. That else is a quite a major sign for me. This may have had trouble getting made. Now, I know that in 2012 he wanted to make this, and they were going to give him 40 million. And he said, no, I just won't make it, and then just didn't do it for years and years. And I sort of agree to that. Is this 70? This is 70 million, I believe.
95.
95. You don't really see a cinematic flair here, although there's an identity on screen. I'll say this: there's definitely there's more like a visual sentiment of the camera just floats. It looks quite good when the camera's up on the cars, and he likes to swoop in. But there's a lack of digitalization, third time's a charm, that you see in Public Enemies and even in Black Cat. There's very lack of pause here, which then would demonstrate there's a lack of shooting availability. When I was in the car before it almost killed me today, I'm sure we'll get into that later, it sort of dawned on me in the fact that when Michael Mann was in his pomp, he worked with Warner Brothers in his formidable years, in that he made Last of the Mohicans, Heat, The Insider,
Ali?
and then he would make Ali. I don't know who Ali's with, but he made them with Warner Brothers, and then I think Ali is Warner Brothers as well. Then he moved on to go make with Paramount with Collateral. But then he went to Universal, which is Miami Vice, Public Enemies, and Black Cat, which is in the UK. This is, and then after 2015, seized. I think working with two production houses, and then now working with Sky Original or STX, which is predominantly a Chinese-backed. I don't know if it's Chinese, but it's probably an Asian-backed production house, I believe. The Mile 22 era of Peter Berg. We've all been there.
Ouch.
Throwback, yeah. That would be a sort of like an issue that you can't get the funding here. I don't know necessarily why. That worried me to go into this. So I can understand what you mean there. I think he more than makes up with it, and just he again that visceral sense of the just inward feeling, in that he's providing sequences on screen that are very much fundamentally easy to understand, but don't give very much off. And again, though, for no one in an American market to want to touch this for 90 million as a Michael Mann movie with Adam Driver, I don't know. I think there'll probably be a little bit more to come out there. But considering that Ford v Ferrari was very, very well received, and there's been a lot of sort of this racing second wind within cinema, yeah, that idea of going straight to streaming and just being saved by Neon, which is again a very small, not small, but smallish,
Independent.
Independent, is a slightly worrying thing. Perhaps that may have given. Well, again, they only bought the distribution rights, didn't they, as well? So it wasn't even them that put the finance in. So STX must have had some conditions of this being 2 hours long. I wonder if he'd have had more free reign under a Neon, but less money. Maybe that would be more beneficial for him. But again, I think it's a Sky original, which I couldn't even name another Sky original in the UK, which is a Rupert Murdoch backed cable TV channel, essentially like your HBO in the US. Did not fill me with joy. I also didn't think the trailers were cut very well, which genuinely upset me throughout it. Really looked poor in crafting an identity. But again, I think there's a film struggles with that as well on a visual sense. Not to contradict myself, but more so a more prolonged visual narrative. Again, that would worry me. What's next? The whole thing. Not to jump the gun here, but you say about it looking quite, not to put words in your mouth, but it looked more so the lackluster from a production house that hasn't got anything else. Where he thinks who he thinks he's going to get Heat 2 produced by Warner Brothers would worry me, because this is barely broke 20 million, and it cost 90 to make, didn't it? So I don't know. And again, Warner Brothers are in the shit here because they haven't got the DCU. They've got to go back onto the Jameson. They have to reset. They've fallen out with Christopher Nolan, who is the fanboy. They've got Denis Villeneuve, who's going to gear up for Doom Part 2. If that bombs, his Messiah goes to tits up. And then
Dave Mattel.
Yeah. So,
one of the spin-offs of Barbie. It's
yeah,
going to make big bucks.
Yeah.
The Batman universe better deliver.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting if they go back to the auteurs, and I think that day is gone now. So where he gets that produced, I don't know. But it's interesting that Apple TV are picking up Scott and Scorsese. Michael Mann seems to be the one forgotten about, and it's interesting that Netflix would have done an absolute dime with this. Again, perhaps it's again. To reiterate my point, it's interesting that he's a digitalite, isn't he? He's someone who looks into the digital tenfold. He envisioned that with Black Cat in the narrative, but on a visual sense, his digital cameras, red cameras, so on and so forth. Does that mean that he's against the digitalization of publication of cinema? Is he against Netflix? I don't know if on the record if that's true. I don't know if you can have your cake and eat it. So I wonder, that's a strange relationship if so. But Netflix would have done really well here. Apple TV probably couldn't afford it, but 90 million seems like a pretty good deal to take. But again, they've got it in cinemas. It's getting a lot of buzz, but I know it's just a very long-winded answer. I'm sort of talking to myself here. I apologise, but it's very interesting that this does have a very cheap type of look. But I think it gives credit to him as a filmmaker, in that even as I said at the beginning, the linear approach to narrative here, there's still loads of form to be found. I think that is a credit to him as a director on a visual sense, and that he can probably make shit just turn into sprinkles like that. I think he's very capable of doing that. And at the age that he is, I think he needs to keep on making cinema, because there's a lot out there that he could do and make something really interesting. I don't want him to do the bloody HBO show that he did with Angelique. The I can't
Tokyo
remember what it's
Vice.
called. Yeah. you can tell that the pilot episode and the second episode are two different types of visceral experiences, and I think he's very much a person who needs to step away from the small, because I can see Heat 2 going to HBO Max. I really can, or Max, whatever it's called now, and it not having Driver whatsoever. But yeah, if that answers your question, I know that was long-winded. I apologize.
Well, I have two things to say. I think first it's important to mention that this is a new cinematographer. It's not his long-term one. This is the guy who did Mank and the guy who did The Killer. So I think speaks a narrative there as far as streaming titles.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's interesting just like seeing the reaction to this. Yes, I agree. Seeing the reaction to this, seeing the reaction to Napoleon, which go check out our Napoleon review. At the end, we have like this extensive conversation about the like marketplace for these types of films. I think that it was really screwed putting it out there in theaters on Christmas when there's a ton of other options for pretty much every other demographic, plus coming out at Venice with a very lackluster reaction there. I mean, like, people are not loving this film. The conversation is not whether you're talking about awards, whether you're talking about commercially, whether you're talking about just like the general audience who goes to see this. I don't think a lot of people are liking this movie, to be honest. I think the reaction, the release strategy really is not beneficial to this film. I think it is this, like, we're seeing, we talked about that with Napoleon, that I don't know if these streamers are going to even want to invest in these films. So now you're even getting a reduced marketplace of like, who's going to want to pick these up? Who's going to want to pick up the next Michael Mann film? I don't think Heat 2 carries even the same like weight as Gladiator 2, if you want to say. So I don't know. I am very nervous about the future here, and I don't think audiences, I guess, are not necessarily someone who's clamoring for the next Michael Mann film. I don't think in general, but I just don't think the marketplace with how it's evolving is going to be pleasant to someone like him. I mean, I think Ridley Scott will survive for the rest of his career, right? We talked about that. I don't think Mann's going to be able to find people to have his vision and put it out how it needs to be seen, because there's no way this film would work on streaming. There's no way you can release a Michael Mann film, in my opinion, on streaming unless like very specific circumstances with a very specific goal through production on what that's going to be. I don't see it, but maybe that's me being kind of nihilistic.
No, I'm going to agree with that. And I'm going to say it in a different term as well, because I hate to say this as someone who loves the cinema, but I seem to love filmmakers who A, are restricted to make films, and B, have a very niche but wonderful fan base. And I think Michael Mann and the Wachowskis are very similar. I know that people are going to shit. I'm going, talking about it. I have to, because it makes sense. I do agree with the sentiment that if you look at the Wachowskis' Amazing Resurrections and you look at Michael Mann's Ferrari, okay, let's say if he goes and makes Heat 2, we're going to live in that world. We're going to live in that space. It's happened, right? I hate to say this, but the only people who went to go see the Matrix Resurrections, when me in my Matrix gear, my shoes, my pants, my teddy bear that I was lucky to be given by the crew here, which is locked away because the dog will eat him. And I was there, I've got my blanket on and stuff like that, and 6 other people who watched the first one, and nobody else, because it's its own converged trilogy of people that doesn't bring new audiences. Why would you? Why do I want to watch Matrix 4 when I can watch John Wick 4, which is relevant now? It's not 20 years ago, which again I think is a small-minded type of sentiment. But ultimately, if you're paying $8, $10, $11 an hourly wage, which is an hour of your work, you feel free to pick whatever you want to. There's no way that anyone should judge you otherwise. The only people who will turn up for Heat 2 will be 4 people, and 2 of them will have a Heat t-shirt on. I know the 2. One person will like Manhunter, the person will say Black Cat's my favourite film. And I do think that, and that's a very, again, nihilistic, sadistic way to put things. But I agree with you, Carson. These filmmakers are so niche in the way that they've crafted films, and essentially not even an egotistical way, but have been quite self-centered. I want to make this cinema, and haven't made commercial vehicles in the sense that they'll bring people in. And ultimately, in the long run, it's a severely lacking thing, because you don't bring new fans in. You just bring people who have liked your cinema. And I think all power to the filmmakers. They're making what they want to do, and they're not making pieces of shit that they don't want to. All power to they can sleep comfortable at night. I can sleep comfortable at night because I like what I like. But in the long run, it does not help. There's a reason why, let's say that we call it commercialism, in the stuff that when Brian De Palma had to make The Untouchables. He had to make Scarface because it was a commercial vehicle. His name was on the billboard, and they were big films with Academy Award winners, and people flocked to see them. And then maybe 30% of that went to go watch the smaller films like Snake Eyes that he would make. You retain an audience from bigger commercial entities. Michael Mann has never done that. Michael Mann has never made the commercial vehicle. He made Jericho Mile, which we'll talk about later. He made The Keep, which everyone hated, and he's just ultimately just put to the side. Then he made Thief, which is a small film cult favorite. Then he made Manhunter, small film cult favorite. And then we go into the 91, 92, stuff like that. He makes Last of the Mohicans, small film, cult favorite. Then we go into the Heat business where it fucking booms. But no one who watched Heat went to go watch The Insider. And I don't think many people who watched The Insider went to go watch Ali. And I don't think many people who watched Ali went to go watch Collateral, so on, so forth, until we get to Ferrari, where there's 3 people waiting to watch it. Longevity-wise, as anyone may have guessed, doesn't really create a big enough demand or audience. So the issue that will happen to Ridley Scott eventually, I think we may differ here, I think we spoke about Napoleon, is that he will stop being able to make the films he wants to and have to cater to the audience that are there. And making bigger films like the Alien Covenant sequel, it will never happen because there'll be 6 people there who like Prometheus, or maybe Alien Covenant to begin with, and it's not. There are people like Blade Runner, etc. Denis Villeneuve is one, and Christopher Nolan's going to, if he's not careful, is going to suffer as well. In that I think Nolan's different because Nolan is making corporate stuff. Not corporate stuff. He's making sort of corporate stuff for himself. That he's made the Batman trilogy. He's done that. Whereas Denny's still trying to go into the Blade Runner. Then he's making Doom, but he also made Enemy. So they're very much on the same trajectory. Be interesting to see how them two do, like the likes of Michael Mann, Ridley Scott, those big heavy hitters. But I'm on the same wavelength with you. I don't know if you agree, Nick. I think that when the time comes for something big, I think the time's gone there. He's going to have to restrict himself to make smaller films, and maybe making that film for 40 million may have been the better option. However, 10 years later, we're here, and
yeah.
Would you say it was worth it for him? Undoubtedly,
No.
for me, yes. But no one else going to watch Ferrari was like, "Oh my god, it was so worth the wait." People just went on a whim. I just, who's wearing
I
a
think
Ferrari t-shirt? Sorry, Nick, go on.
I think it's just obsolete. That's what it is at the end of the day. Which is not something I want to say. I went into it hoping for something more, but he didn't give it to me. It's I mean, I don't know where I will be when I'm like 80 years old or something. If I get
We'll
to
be
be
doing
80 years
this.
old.
Be shy.
ClapperCast episode 1,200.
I'll
But I
be there.
think like
I'll
when
be
you
there.
get to that age, you see a lot of directors still trying to not necessarily innovate, but at least reinvent themselves. We've seen it with Spielberg, we've seen it with Scorsese, like all these directors. Movies may be financial or not, but at least they're being well liked, they're getting the awards, they're getting clout. Filmmakers like Brian De Palma, they are doing the same. They did the same
Yeah.
thing over and over again for the past like 10, 15 years, to the point that people just got tired and stopped watching the movies, and they got like progressively smaller and smaller budgets until you get like Domino, which is not a good movie
I didn't think
by
we
De
were going to go
Palma.
there today.
Ferrari's not Domino, thankfully. It's a much, much better movie. But at the end of the day, I just look at it and think, what did this give me that I couldn't get with other movies? And if the answer is just some cool driving sequences and a horrific accident, it's like, well, is it justified? I'm not necessarily the one to say yes or no, but I don't know. I feel even someone like Terrence Malick, who I have like a love-hate relationship with his
Agreed.
later period of cinema, at least he reinvented himself. At least he like
Oh,
embraced a different side of things that he wasn't really doing 15, 20 years before. And I don't really see much different in here. It's kind of ironic that Michael Mann reshaped before Twin Peaks came out and that whole and like X-Files in the 90s, he reshaped television series with Miami Vice in the 80s. It was like, holy shit, like TV shows can look cinematic, like the neon lights and there's the shootouts. It's like, holy shit. And then you get to Ferrari, which looks like a made for TV film in the 2020s. Which is crazy. Like, yeah, I forgot it was the same cinematographer as The Killer, which is movies made specifically for streamers that also screen on the big screen at Venice. I didn't see it on the big screen, but it looked just so much different because I think it's just the David Fincher touch. Like it does indeed look like a David Fincher film, still made for streaming, but it looks like a David Fincher film. And this one just looks like made for TV, like generic. The cinematic language between the dialogue and the action is so different from one another. It's not honest. I was going to compare it to Marvel in some way. I'm not, but it feels like second unit. It feels like you get, I don't know, like when they did what was it, like Birds of Prey, the DC movie. It was like, oh, it's standard movie, and then you get Chad Stahelski directing the second unit for the action scenes. Like, oh shit, this feels like vibrant and invigorating, and that's how it felt like here. You watch, like, I think of the Prison Breakout in Public Enemies. The digital cameras on the car, and it's like holy shit, this feels like a documentary. And then you get into like the houses and the villa, and Marion Cotillard is having a bath. It's like, oh, this feels like still intimate in a way. And you watch this movie and it feels like it's made by two different people. The dialogue is just static camera, shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot, wide shot of people talking, maybe a little dolly if they're moving around the set, and that's it. And then you get to the action, and it's so vibrant and energetic. It's like, oh my god, the film is coming to life. But it's a completely different cinematic language. It doesn't really jive well together. And I've seen people kind of complain about that, but try to try to twist it into a positive. No, because you see, it's the torn man. It's the two sides of Ferrari. It's like, no. I'm not
wouldn't
taking
say
that.
it. Yeah, I'd be
I'm pushing it here,
I was
guys.
just
I'm
gonna,
pushing it here.
would you? And this is not to come down to my level. Could you in a world say that might be rust on his part?
Yeah, in a
I mean,
little way. Yeah, I think
he has
when you said
behind
it,
been behind the camera, but in small doses of stuff. But he hasn't done something like this. Could you
I
consider it?
guess he hasn't really made. I think that's the only like different thing for him. It's like he's never made high speed chases like this. There's like the car crash in Collateral. There's like the boat ride and whatever in Miami Vice, but there's no action scenes like the ones in Ferrari. So I can see the appeal in that sense of actually shooting, which is kind of insane, like actually shooting with real cars and all of that, like very little digital work, actually shooting it in Italy instead of like CGing things in,
Mm-hmm.
or shooting it in California and pretending it's Italy. So they did a lot of work in the production design for sure, and all of that. But yeah, it feels rusty. Like I was rewatching clips because I forgot. I was like, I remember kind of enjoying parts of Black Hat, and then rewatched them. I was like, "Holy shit, this this looks pretty good." Like, I still wasn't a fan of the story, but I was like, "Man, just the visuals and the way, just running around the city and just clicking the keyboard and the laptop, and the energy is just insane. It's off the charts in that film." So maybe it's what you said, Jack, earlier. Maybe it's been 10 years almost. It got a bit rusty, which
But,
is
yeah.
understandable, I guess.
I'll just respond to that, and then I want to ask maybe Carson a question because if we're gonna get into skepticism, I really do want, because I'd be interested to know what Carson says, because Carson's quite ruthless with it. But the first thing is to say, I think this film perfectly encapsulates old Hollywood and new Hollywood, and the mixture of them don't work. I think Michael
Mm.
Mann has left a Hollywood trying to make a film perhaps ahead of its time. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and with issues that have gone before with Public Enemies and issues with Miami Vice and stuff, and his old '90s worldview in the early 2000s, and then the 2000 and late 2000s, and then just touching on the mid 2010s. I think to stop 10 years in Hollywood is like almost waiting is stopping to allow another generation of viewpoint in. I don't think any director who is on the level of Michael Mann on a visceral sense can take himself out of the running completely and then try to opt in 10 years back in. I think Malik is an interesting one, going to do philosophy in France and then jumping back in with The Thin Red Line. is a once in a blue moon, but he was left to his own devices to go shoot up an island in more ways than one, and then 6 years later let Christopher Plummer climb up a tree at 79. I think he was allowed to do what he wanted because the expectancy of it was, we might get something out of it here. I think that's gone with Michael Mann for a lot of studios. And I also think that you just look at the idea of how he wants to shoot, which is fast, ferocious. But then there's people going, well, but we need our big moment. We need our third act big moment. And he doesn't allow that. And I think that's what Carson said earlier about the dissonance of its third act, in that it doesn't give anyone that predisposed, for lack of good and bad, Carson, I'm not saying you're wrong or anything, but I think he doesn't allow his audience to get that. Is that conscious or is that in spite? Because I think Michael Mann is a person who will look at modern cinema and have a few things to say, much like Ridley Scott's saying, but he's just got it more so in the public eye. So I see this as a film of trying to watch John Huston in the 70s direct, or in the 80s. It's not the John Huston making the 1940s films and stuff like that. I think Hollywood just changes. It's like, in 10, 15 years' time, if Scorsese had stopped after, let's say, Bringing Out the Dead and then went to make a Wolf of Wall Street, it wouldn't be the same boisterous nature. He had to make films in between, with the Gangs of New York being a massive one, The Aviator being a massive one, having to learn CGI. Michael Mann's taken big gaps of trying to go back and boots on the ground filmmaking, and it's changed. I think Adam Driver is an actor who will probably play with that and want to do that, having been with Terry Gilliam's movie, Don Quixote and stuff like that. I think he has a sentiment of a Juilliard actor where forget what's on screen with CGI and let's just work person to person. I like the development in this film, but I do think it's a sentiment and ideology of what my cinema is and what cinema actually is now, which is actually quite sad. Maybe that's the sad part of it, watching someone who's not quite up to. I mean, what do? Do you just stop, or do you do what Hitchcock does and just carry on? It's horrible. Like the Wachowskis stop. Well, I'll make something when I want to make, and maybe that's beneficial to them, and maybe more so beneficial for an audience as well, that they're not just making the next pieces of shit come out like a Marvel film. I quite like Michael Mann doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't want to make a. Why does he want to make a Marvel movie? Why does he want to do a Kenneth Branagh and make Thor? I don't know. Maybe he wants to pay some bills. I don't know. But the one thing I wanted to ask, right, because I've seen this quite a lot come up on the Twitter, and I do think it's an interesting argument, because I know my answer. And if anyone listens to this, they'll know my answer without even have to say this. I've read a lot of people begin to look at Michael Mann as a film director, especially with his filmography, and are suggesting that Michael Mann's only ever made one good film. And I just wondered for both of you, because you're both on the spectrum of being engaged with Michael Mann. I think it goes Carson, Nick, then me. I'm just very intrigued how much stock you would put into that. I mean, genuinely, if it's engagement, if it's entertainment, one really brilliant film, or do you think he's made quite a few dents in the track, or what? I'm just interested, because I've heard a lot of people, obviously, that film would be Heat, and the others are just good for all small bits and bats. But I was just interested, because I've heard that argument come up on Letterboxd a few times and on Twitter. So I just want to know what you two would have thought to that.
I mean, I definitely disagree with that. I think overall as a filmography, I would say most of them probably are more middle of the road to bad. But I think for sure there's at least 3 to 4 or 5 masterpieces in there. Again, I think Mann in general, when I look at him, I wouldn't say he's for me one of the best filmmakers of all time, but those highs are undeniably some of the highest of highs I think you get. So I would disagree with that.
Yeah. I think it's 3 genuine masterpieces in terms of just grander cinema: Thief, Heat, Collateral, and then you get to the more love Miami Vice. Miami Vice is sweet. I love Manhunter.
Manhunter doesn't do it for you?
Manhunter does it, yeah. But I wouldn't put it in masterpiece level. I'm watching Thief and vibes are immaculate. Manhunter, sweet movie, love it, but it's not Thief. Thief is upper level. For me, it's right. I think after that, it depends from person to person. But that's a
not to compare our favorites, but I think when we talk about the filmography of Friedkin, which we talked about earlier this year, and you're oh, nearly, there's some misses for sure, right? But like there's so much consistency in him making masterclass work where it's like that's such an elevated filmography. I don't think Mann's that level, right? We're talking about him, we have 2 to 3 that we like, but like I do think he's like above average. He definitely is like good.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Friedkin, you look at his '70s work. You've got what the French Connection, Sorcerer, and the Exorcist. I think that rivals Coppola's '70s. It's that good. But I
Yeah.
think Malik's not Malik. God, sorry. I think Mann's filmography would be the '90s with Last of the Mohicans, Heat, and The Insider. And I think if you look at other directors of that time, ultimately it becomes the video market, doesn't it? So it becomes Tarantino, Kevin Smith, and like again later on Wachowski's in showcasing the next generation of film school being watching films more so in a blue collar environment. But if you look at the big budget stuff, I don't think Scorsese hits near as deep as he probably could have done with the '90s. In certain, oh shit, I should not. No, that's bollocks. That because that's Goodfellas and Casino. I do apologize. But I think bar him, let's say, I've just yeah, what a credible witness I am now. No, I'll take that back. I'll take that back in completely. I think his early '90s work is pretty good. I think when you get to Bring Out the Dead, which is very distinctly different, and but there's likes of Kundun and stuff. I think it's like ooh, that's a bit of a mixed bag. But definitely with Casino and Goodfellas, Michael Mann is probably the second person I would put there on a big scale. Wouldn't have thought I would have put Scott in there. Either one actually, even though I think Ridley's probably more of the larger director in boasting big productions. And then you go to the 2000s, and I just think he just digitalized his work and just forgot about that texture, unfortunately. So that's where it comes down. But I've just seen a few people make that claim and thinking, okay, interesting. I also think, God, this is going to get very political here. Oh, I don't know if I say this. I will do. You want to cut this out? Feel free. I know you won't do because but don't leave me to the wolves. I also think Michael Mann is a director, consciously or not, and it's probably more subconscious. Is all God, this is going to get very bleak here, but stay with me, please. I think he's consciously a director who's been quite. How do I say this? How do I say this now? Stay with me. Stay with me. Influenced by post 9/11. I think when you look at him as a filmmaker, he then goes on paranoia and he looks at issues within the state. He looks at, granted, I think he has done before, but it's all been procedural television. I think if 9/11 doesn't happen, I don't think he makes Collateral. I don't think he makes Miami Vice. And I think those two films come after a very big incident in American culture as well as history. The breach in cinema influence, again, the Dark Knight trilogy, which ultimately is influenced by Heat, secondary, is quite interesting. But he's definitely a director who had a second wind of wanting to subconsciously. I don't know if he would necessarily admit this. Perhaps he would do. Perhaps he wouldn't. Knowing his background in procedural units with the police and stuff like that, I think his politics would, and definitely from being from Chicago, would influence a certain viewpoint of the world, undoubtedly. But I think that the influence of that event has undoubtedly changed his perspective on looking at cinema. And Miami Vice is an interesting one because when you look at that, as I know this is going to a Michael Mann thing now, but just indulge me, please. I do apologize. I do this every week, but that self-absorbent look into American politics, because I read about Miami Vice and when it first came out, because I remember renting it and thought this is absolutely shit. And then we did a Gems a few years ago, and I watched both versions. I think I did the unrated director's cut, which is a completely different film of how it frames it. But I remember Colin Farrell pointed a view and said he had a very miserable experience on that film because he thought he was signing up for something that would be like not Lethal Weapon. I'm going to quote him here, but it would have a bit of fun. And when you look at that film, there's no fun there. It's again, it's entertaining, but there's no sort of contextual fun. There's no very
There's
little
no
smiles.
jokes,
Yeah, there's no
wisecracks.
It's a very much clinical in the sense of we're going to watch two men fight for their base in Florida, Miami, which again is a red state to begin with. It's interesting the politics of it, I'll say, and then you look at. He outgrows that when he gets into Public Enemies, and then it's interesting what he talks about there as well, in sense of looking at an individual who's fighting against the state-backed police force, its own army viewpoint, which is twisted. Then he's like a modern day Robin Hood. It's interesting how he's twisting that as well. Then you look at Black Hat, which is political espionage again, looking at the stock exchange, and then you look at that with the 9/11 event. Not to sound like I'm deep into this at all. I'm not QAnon anyone. Don't email the show in. We're not supporters or anything. Just got to say that, guys. Sorry. Yeah, buzzword or anything, but it's interesting that you look at that politics in those films as well, as subliminal as they are, as subconscious as they are. Then you look at Ferrari. I got back to it in the end. I don't think Ferrari is on the same wavelength of wanting to communicate that Michael Mann subconscious element. And the reason for that is that it's 30 years in the making, so it's a Michael Mann who was trying to make this film in 2000, which is 23 years ago. But also, it's a film that doesn't really have much politics in itself, aside from a societal one of gender. I think is interesting to look at. Again, I think you both mentioned this of how it construes Penelope Cruz's character to be quite one note, as powerful it is impacting. It's a woman dealing with grief, and what does Shailene Woodley do? She cooks, she cleans, and she looks after a kid. That might be Italian patriarchy. That Nick will have to question himself on that. I don't know, but they're very different themes to me. That was, and I admit, not to push back on you saying that he's a filmmaker who is done, but I do think in a sense he has pushed himself to make a different film in the fact that there's very little political underbelly here, and it's more so a dynamic of character. And I like that. I think that's why I like it. I like the fact that it's a screenplay that's obviously had multiple revisions, but the identity of it comes from a 2000s look at trying to look at characters. And I think Ali is very similar in a way that it's political, yes, but it's trying to look at one character, and the political fallout is secondary and like a triangle, a pyramid. Sorry. Here, I think it's very similar, and it's interesting that Ali is often presumed as to be the lackluster one after the Inside in 2001, and then he goes again into the big 9/11 type. I know I'm going deep into this, but I paid for a fucking MA in Newcastle. They owe me something. I can talk on this podcast about it. That's my sentiments entirely. So I would disagree about you saying that he's a filmmaker that hasn't evolved. Maybe he hasn't evolved within the cinematic landscape as what I mentioned before. But I do think this is a director trying to then take it back to the roots of looking at just character. I mean, Jericho Miles very political. Thief is quite political with the Chicago, so maybe more so less than anything else. Manhunter extremely. Miami Vice. Again, you go further into it. This one is about a person, a damaged person, which I find unique to his filmography. Perhaps even like Manhunter, weirdly enough. Maybe waffling here, but I don't know how you two would find that perspective. That's just a film student talking there. That's someone with an MA. So fucking hell, someone's going for a PhD here. You can at least chop in and give me something back on that. I don't know. What would you think, both of you?
I mean, he's kind of pulling a reverse Schrader, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think Schrader is very, very influenced by 9/11. Go check out, and Jack, you were not hallucinating in our Exorcist prequel episode of Uncut Gems. I did make the claim that the Exorcist prequel from Schrader directly did come from 9/11. So, like,
there's a bad time for me as well. So yeah.
Right. So, like, as Schrader goes on his filmography, I think it just gets more and more political. So he's kind of creating, like, I agree fully. I think 9/11 people really underrate in general in culture, and maybe it's because I kind of teach about it at times. Like, people underrate how big of an effect it has on culture, and I think it's very clear within certain people's filmographies. The one thing is, like, I don't know, it's weird for me to view that narrative and then say Ferrari is an evolution, because for me it feels like then like a reduction of his voice and what he's aiming for. I go back to Nick's question, and it kind of struck me, Nick, where you were like, what am I going to take away from this? And I was thinking, like, in a year, right, when this is available on the back of plane seats, what am I going to remember about going to see Ferrari? Like, how is this film going to touch me? And what it gave me, and I think the extent of what it truly gave me in the long run, is that I got to go to a theater, I got to buy a ticket, and I got to see Michael Mann's name in the credits that I was leaving, because I leave immediately after the runtime ends. So, like, I don't think the film has much beyond that. I would be curious for an exercise, like what you guys would think. And Nick, please also respond to Jack and his 9/11 conspiracy theory. But I'm very curious what you guys would say to, like, what would your reaction be if this was not Michael Mann and this was just a random director who, like, just released this film? Because I feel like a lot of why we're giving this time and credit and attention is because of the man name. Like
Agreed.
Napoleon, I disagree. I think Napoleon probably wouldn't have been on our schedule if it wasn't for Scott. But the conversation we had of Napoleon and the worth we found in that is not because it's a Ridley Scott film. It's because of things within the actual feature, not to trigger anyone who hated Napoleon who's listening. But I don't know. I think it's a very curious conversation. But Nick, so we've kind of thrown like large scale questions at you. Respond to something, please.
As far as the like 9/11 question goes, I can totally see that. Even just the way he embraced digital filmmaking, and there's all this paranoia in these future films, and these criticizing the American government in ways as well, and policing and all of that. I can totally see that. Yeah, this does feel like a reduction. I think you said, Carson. I think I like that. Yeah, but eesh, I don't know how I would feel if this were not like same exact movie, just directed by someone else. I probably would. I don't know. I'm gonna say I might like it the same, maybe slightly less, or maybe slightly more. You know, if it's like a newcomer, it's like, holy shit, look at those action scenes. Yeah, story was whatever. But then there's expectations, which are understandable. I think like you're making your 14th feature film after 40, 30 something years of making movies. Like it's understandable there's expectations there for a certain type of brand of quality in a way. But this made me think of another movie that we mentioned, I think, in like rapid fire reviews, and you mentioned Friedkin, and I'm thinking about his last movie. You know, it's a movie that's stripped down, just stripped back, people talking in a courtroom, and that's it for like 99% of the movie, with 1% in another room and the corridor, and that's it. I was like, okay, it could have easily been like a fluke, like one of those movies, like it's like a movie made explicitly for. It was actually Showtime, but it was like still like made for TV movie. And the Kane Mutiny Court Martial, just stellar. It does what he has to do brilliantly. It fits perfectly into his filmography. He actually managed to inject some memorable performances that work. It has an ending that's 100% Friedkin. Like the way that movie ends is excellent, and the fact that it's going to be like the last scene of any movie of his ever is, in my opinion, it's going to be remembered by fans as well as people remember like the ending of Eyes Wide Shut and the final line. It's like, oh, it's perfect. And I'm thinking, like, knock on wood, crossing finger, like something happens to Michael Mann. It doesn't make Hit 2. This is going to be his last movie. I was like, it's Ferrari, you know.
You've triggered me there. So this is going to be like 3 hours long. I'll say this, right? The first thing
Oh
is
boy.
I find it interesting that we're talking about reductive in the sense that I don't see it as a filmmaker perhaps trying to echo the past in filmmaking exploits. I think he's definitely had 10 years out, and I think he's trying to go a different direction in not in a going into visceral because that's his operandi, but more so look at a character study. And I don't think that's necessarily reductive for me in the sense of perhaps wanting to watch Heat 2 or The Insider or something like that. I think it's a very different type of animal. The thing about William Friedkin is that William Friedkin, and he would say so himself, is, and not to shit on your opinion here at all. I'm going to fight back because this is the £9,000 in my head that's saying just fucking come on. I do think that he's a filmmaker who's ultimately and utterly inspired by Citizen Kane. And if you watch Citizen Kane and you watch The Sorcerer and you watch The Exorcist, not necessarily The French Connection, but you definitely watch Kane Mutiny Court Martial, they're films that allow the camera to dictate everything. It is a filmmaker's wet dream in the sense of they understand everything on the page. I'll let the cattle do that. They'll do it. They're actors, by the way. You can do that. But my job now is I'm going to position you here, and I'm going to cut here, and I'm going to cut there, and I'm going to pan here and pan there. That is a sign of an artistic director who understands the power of the lens. So William Friedkin was always going to do that. I think you look at Kane Mutiny Court Martial, and this is going to be hyperbolic here, but you look at The Exorcist, right? And this is going to be fucking below people's minds, I'm sure. I don't see. Be ready for this now. I don't see much evolution between those two films. when cinematic craft. And that could not be more of a generous sentiment to that director, in that I think The Exorcist is a perfect film. I really do. Let me go here, because I think it's a perfect film of how it's crafted. Every lens, every pan, every crane, every cut is perfect in that film. And the exact same is in the the Kane County Marshal Court, whatever it's called.
Beauty Court Martial.
Yeah, yeah. That shows the talent of a filmmaker who understands what he wants to get on screen, and the power that he had understanding that at 87 years of age is fundamentally flawless. But he's a filmmaker who was raised with the fact that his influences were extremely similar in the fact that, why do I use a Dutch angle to show my character on screen? What is that trying to evoke? And then went with that and did it in his own way, with the Dutch angles, with his pans, with his zooms. Michael Mann is not a director like that. I think Michael Mann is a director where a character walks out on the street with a score from a fucking keyboard, with neon lights in Chicago where it's cold. There's water on the ground and there's a full moon there. That is a visceral sense of Michael Mann. It's not necessarily how he gets the stuff on the screen. That's not his issue. It's what's going to be on the screen. I think they're two very different filmmakers in a sense. So when I look at Ferrari, I don't necessarily look at it as in a sense of, oh my god, he's used a pan, he's used a crane shot here. He does very interesting stuff with his edits, where oftentimes it just cuts to black here, it fades to black. It doesn't need to be. I don't think he's a director who's necessarily encompassed with the form of cinema and his framing of it. I think he just wants to have a visceral lens of, can I see this? Can people understand this without dialogue? Can you feel this? Can you feel it burn in the background? That cigarette that James Caan inhales in the diner, can you feel that burn on his lips, knowing that if he doesn't do this job, he's in the shit? Can you understand that the black eyes around Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell in Miami Vice? Does that say to you? Does that speak to you? Does Robert De Niro's decision of going down a tunnel in the space of 20 seconds, in staying with his girlfriend, or being clinical and going back to finish the job, does that speak to you? It's all through a visual lens. So I think they're two different beasts. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that Ferrari is on those lines of being a visceral treat in the sense of what's on screen. It doesn't have it lacks texture, but that is what I would suggest to that. The other thing, right, is interesting what Carson said. Carson is exactly the person, and I said it would happen with Heat 2. It's happening now. I think a lot of people like Carson are going to watch this because it's Michael Mann. And I'm not saying that's a detriment to you, Carson. I know that you watch these new releases regardless, but I think there's a lot of people who went to go see this, perhaps out of pity or wanting to, oh, Michael Mann there, let's watch it. I think if J.A. Bayona or James Mangold or fucking Simon West made this, I don't think anyone would watch this. I just don't think it has that bite. It doesn't have that. Where is it? Where are the posters? Where are the trailers on television? You know, I think it's just a director who's at a certain point in his life now where he's taken 10 years out, gone back into it. I hope to God he doesn't go into television, because that'll kill me. That I hate to see that. He's too much of a visceral lens to do it. But that, I think it's already happened then, if that's the case. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's been loads of people. My sister wants to go watch this. Why? Oh, because like Michael Mann, he did Last Mohicans. No one's bothered about Ferrari itself, is it? So the question then upon that goes into, and again, back to you two, this is what we're discussing about, what Carson said. What then is the draw to watch this for an average audience? And if I had to be clinical here and go back to Carson's point, nothing. And maybe that is the most horrid take to take. But I think it's true. I would find anyone hard pressed who went into this not knowing who Michael Mann was, and going into Spine and thought that was amazing. I think a lot of people will come out on this and there'll be one word and they'll say underwhelming.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot out there at the cinema now where, I mean, James Mangold did it with Ford v Ferrari. I think we both agree. I don't know about Nick, but I think this is a pretty fucking great film as well. I think it's probably a 5-star film, gets everything right. for
Ford v
Michael Mann.
Ferrari?
No. Ford v Ferrari. Yeah, James Mangold's film. Yeah.
Yeah, it is excellent.
Yeah.
Do you not like it, Nick?
Yeah, it's good.
Ugh.
I've only
Okay.
seen it like the
We
one
don't need
time
this-
in 2019. But
That's not the.
We
yeah.
don't need to review
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, it is
But
great.
But the idea of that if a director can go make that story, James Mangold, who did what Logan, a completely different film before it, and then would go and do Indiana Jones, a completely different film afterwards, and you look at Michael Mann at Ferrari, who is a visceral director, and it still underwhelms. It doesn't deal me with a great set of sympathy for a person who, I went in there to want to be blown away by Michael Mann, and if I don't find Michael Mann in that film, what is the emphasis to go watch? And I think Carson, that's what I just I agree. I think if this wasn't made by Michael Mann, who's watching that Audi versus Lancia film? I'm reviewing it for Clapper, by the way. But who's going to go watch that? It's the same. No, I don't know who that's made by. No detriment to that film. It might be amazing. This is a Michael Mann film. This is the only reason why it was at Venice.
I think the tragic part of that, and I'm going to be like very blunt here, and I'm not saying this is obviously our opinion. I think we all care about Mann, is that no one gives a fuck about Michael Mann either.
10 years out, man.
Adam Driver, the biggest draw for this film is Adam Driver.
Yeah.
And that says something, because that's not even that huge of a draw. Michael Mann chose to take a break of filmmaking at probably the worst point he can as far as being relevant to new audiences into film. I think that this is an underwhelming film to where people are not going to get back on board of the Michael Mann experiment. If you go into the Michael Mann filmography of the 2000s, I think you're probably going to be underwhelmed. I think that the ideals of the 90s of Mann are not necessarily the ideals that are going to speak to film Twitter or that group who are really passionate about film. I think Michael Mann is a filmmaker who's just like failed to catch on, took a break where he became irrelevant, to be honest, and this is his chance to jump back in. And if this was amazing, people might be saying, or amazing in the sense that they would respond to, I think people would probably be more kind to revisit Mann and kind of lift him up again, but I just don't think that's happening. I think Michael Mann, for the average person, including like the average person on film Twitter, is just an irrelevant name they've heard on lists of really great filmmakers that they don't like, they don't care about, and I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Michael Mann, I agree, is the draw of this film, should be the draw of this film. I think the fact that it's doing so underwhelming compared to something even like Napoleon that we talked about is a statement to how he is as a drawing power, which is not very good, which you can say is tragic. I don't think any of us we're all here, we're talking about Ferrari, right? But I just think it's sad to see, but I think that's just the reality of the world we're living in, is that these people do not care about Michael Mann.
I couldn't argue against that. I think that's not to go down that tangent, but I couldn't argue against that. And it's interesting about those 10 years, because this has been a 30-year project. It's taken 23 years at least to get to screen from its first draft in 2000. I think that, again, to go back to my point about a director having an issue with the state of Hollywood, I think this has been coming for a long time. If you read about the history of Miami Vice and how it was horrific to shoot, there was hurricanes, he had this approach of perhaps being hot shit off Collateral, and perhaps he wouldn't admit this or anything like that. Not that he would listen to this. I hope he wouldn't anyway, because I don't think it would be very kind. But it's the truth anyway. I think he was a director who went into that film thinking, I'll push these fuckers as far as I can go. You've got an actor who won an Academy Award, and you've got another actor who was in Alexander, who understands that working with a big director wasn't his cup of tea, pushing them to go to Paraguay with a hurricane, putting them through fake, at the time, real drug busts, and then, again, putting them in boats on water with issues of drowning, stuff like that. I think they were going to shoot the ending in Paraguay. Jamie Foxx went, fuck that, I'm off. This is not libel. This is fact. Went to the States, said, I'm not getting on a plane again. They shoot the ending here, or you don't have one. Held Universal and him to ransom. Then they shot what they had. The film comes out, and theatrical bombs. Doesn't do very well anyway. Makes his director's cut with ultimate footage is a far superior film. Has the same somewhat issues. And then you've got Public Enemies, which I've got second-hand information about how that was on set. We're looking with prima donnas, and what's happening in the public eye now shouldn't become as a shock. I think then you get to Black Hat, and you work with someone up and coming who's worked into a model of the Marvel enterprise, working with someone who's like, do you not understand what I'm trying to get at here? And this actor's like, well, why am I like really big and I'm in prison? because that's what you are. Get on with it. Let's make a film. And they're having issues with that. I think it's a director who, for quite some time, has had this prolonged lapse of having difficulty with the studio system, and very much like directors, what we've mentioned, Nick, you've mentioned a few, Carson, you've mentioned a few, where they fall out of love. What did they all end up doing after, like Terry Gilliam's one, for example, is that made loads of films, did somewhat well, and then made mediocre films, and then people stopped giving him money. So what did he go do? He went to go make Don Quixote after Zero Theorem that no one went to go watch. And what has he done since? And I think this is the same sentiments that Michael Mann is, that he's at a point where he's been brought up within the lack of a studio system, but then came about in the late 70s, 80s, darling in the 90s, began to have issues with the studio system in the 2000s, although a pioneer of digitalization, which old-heartedly kept him in the zeitgeist. And then after that is then blown up with Attack of the Clones and the Star Wars thing. And what else is there really to blow him up to? And it's then the issue of the star. And I think Ferrari's probably maybe he wouldn't say it, and maybe this would hurt Nick, is what he said. Maybe this is the swan song. Maybe this is the unspoken, I'll get one over on you and I'll make the film that I want to make. And that's it. Perhaps that's the identity. Would that be a crying shame? Wholeheartedly. But I also think those 10 years, I don't think they were necessarily self-induced. I think partly so, to get away with it, work in smaller teams with HBO, with Look, and then which got cancelled because it mistreated horses, then to go and do bits and bats here or there, and then to get back into Tokyo Vice, which season 2 has just sort of like died of death because you've got an absolute arsehole in the that again, that's not liable. I've had a drink. So I think it's just a formula of. I don't know if you two have ever heard this, but are you two aware of a director called John Frankenheimer?
Yeah, of
Made
course.
Ronin, made
Seconds.
Manchurian
The
Candidate.
Train.
With Burt Lancaster.
Reindeer Games.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave that there. I didn't think you were going to bring that one up, but he's a great example of a studio using him as a principal force on a film set. In that, I am the lead, I am the master and commander. Everyone salutes me. I'm the boss, and this is my world. If you don't want to get involved in it, you can fuck off. And that's essentially the idea. I think what Michael Mann was, in a sense of, this is my film. I'm the leader. Trust me. And for a long time it was the same returns. But then John Frankenheimer gets involved in Dr. Moreau and just sabotages himself, and then goes to make an Exorcist prequel, then dies before it, which is weird how we get back to that as well. But his time was up in how that is dictated to, because when he made Ronin in '98, which would have been a year before Dr. Moreau, he worked with the likes of Jean Reno and specifically Bobby De Niro, my mate. And I think he uses the old school clientele of understanding the director as a hierarchy. I think it's different now. I think the star has too much power. And I think Michael Mann is a director who can't bond with that because, well, the star then can go get 50 million from somewhere else. What's the point? I think there's a particular reason why people will work with Scorsese, because it's working with Martin Scorsese. And it used to be the same sentiment we're working with old actors. About the people who would go work with Marlon Brando and then would hate it, but they got to work with Marlon Brando. I think it's like a badge of honor. And I think Michael Mann now, I think he's lost that. Those 10 years have been detrimental. I know this is very long-winded. I know I'm saying that a lot, but that's my viewpoint of him now, in that, again, it's old Hollywood versus new Hollywood. And if Ferrari's what you get, that might be good for Michael Mann, and it might be good for Michael Mann stands like myself and who really do engage with that sort of stuff. But for the more larger audience, again, you say, if you're on a plane, like Carson said, which is a great example, and you've got 6 films that are brand new out, and you've got classics. Who buys this day one on Blu-ray? Who buys the digital version of this film?
Just the stands.
Yeah, and I think the time has probably come, and it's horrible to see someone on high ground. William Friedkin had to go make Bug and had to go make Killer Joe, which were very small, down-to-earth films that were camera work with character-driven actors and directors who wanted to work with the guy who made The Exorcist. The same is probably now with Michael Mann. But the interesting thing is, what does Michael Mann do next?
Heat 2 and then nothing else ever.
Yeah, and why go
Then
back
it's
to
too
the
old for
well? Why go
anything.
back? You made the book with Med Gardiner. It did very well. Nick's read it. I've got it on my phone. I'll read it to some time. You know, you've done it. Why go back to that well? Why find that so important to have a look at that you've made the definitive cop versus robber film? You know, that has influenced the major players of today. Nolan. Why go back to that and disrupt it? That to me is, and I hate to say this, but again, Carson said it, we're being blunt. That's someone who is a lack of passion, B, a lack of insight to what's next, and C, does not want to play ball with anyone else's toys. Those three things do not work in modern Hollywood. They do not work. Which director could say that? Scorsese can't even get funding for anything. Had to go to Netflix for The Irishman. Paramount balked at it. Kills of the Flower Moon balked at it. You know, if David Lynch can't get a film made at Netflix for $6 million, and they're going to go to Red Notice and whatever that stuff was with Gal Gadot, Heart of Stone, whatever it is. These filmmakers, and we spoke about this a lot in Napoleon. So I do appreciate we're going over all ground here. But what is the emphasis now of Michael Mann going forward? Is it retreating to the past and then you fuck up that? Can he do anything distinctively different with the framing of Heat 2 aside from make it a prequel sequel, which again goes back to the remnants of The Godfather Part 2? What are we going there for? I don't want to see Adam Driver as Neil McCauley. Like I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered. I don't want to see someone play Val Kilmer in a film, which Val Kilmer was excellent in. I don't want to see someone play, young Al Pacino, and that's someone who is a massive fan of this person. I'm in a really weird place now, and I can imagine he is as a director. Is that I don't know if you two have ever felt this in a director, but you know it's not done, but the writing is so clearly on the wall. I'd be fucking flabbergasted for him to sit down and give you a 10-year plan. You know.
Well, I mean,
But he's 60. He's 60 years old. I think he's 71. Actually, apologies, but you know he might be older. Apologies, not to say that there's anything wrong with it. We just watched an 89-year-old absolute storm the fucking world.
he's
And
81, like very soon. So
what's left for an 81 filmographer as a director to make that doesn't influence the zeitgeist more than Michael Mann? I don't think he's a director who's ever got his flowers. Ferrari doesn't certainly help. But it feels like the family plot to Alfred Hitchcock fans who accept it, who like it, but no, it doesn't touch on Vertigo or Psycho or you know anything. I'm just trying to make Alfred Hitchcock references there, but you know I don't know if you two have got any film directors close to you who are like that. You know, I don't know. That's my opinion of it. I know I've just rambled there, but
I mentioned him before, but it's De Palma for me. Like what was it, the lesbian.
Oh no,
Oh Jesus!
Passion's pretty fucking good actually. Let's behave ourselves here.
Well, okay, I'm happy for you, Chuck.
I'm
But
not
everything
going
is
to
made
defend.
like scenes. Like that's when you start feeling like,
Oh no, I agree there.
something's off. Something's off.
If I
And
was
then
going
it
to
all led
compare
to
him,
like, yeah,
I would say Passion is eerily similar to Ferrari in an interesting sentiment of old ideas, new visual prowess. Nothing has changed. I will give you that one completely.
yeah. That's probably the main one I can think of. But it's yeah. I think it's just done. I think it's just done for him, especially in the current landscape. If he cannot work on a smaller budget, he has to deliver an experience. Like that's what we figured out in the past 2 years post pandemic. People want to go to the movies for experiences, which isn't necessarily just spectacle itself, but it has to justify going out to the movie
Yeah.
theater. And I think it's crazy that we had Ford v Ferrari 2019 be a super big commercial success, and then you get another movie that's basically like, "Hey, come watch cars race," and it doesn't sell. Because I do generally think, like like you mentioned, like the marketing terrible, like in
Agreed.
selling this movie. And stars don't sell movies anymore unless you're like Tom Cruise or something. Stars don't sell movies. It's either the brand or it's the experience. Like people want to
Yes.
experience something, and there is not much to experience here, which is a shame. In
Yeah.
terms of like a wider appeal, a wider appeal. And I don't think it's going to work out with almost anything he's going to make. Like at this point, after this string of commercial failures and even critical failures, to be honest, it's not like he's winning critics left and right. Heat 2 has to be like I don't know, no, it's not going to work.
How does he even
And
cast that?
well, because like you said, like Godfather Part 2 was made 2 years after the first Godfather. People are still the same age, and then you can just get younger actors for other roles. Freaking Irishman, it was an absolute behemoth of a production to have, 70 and 80-year-olds play 40 and 50-year-olds. Like, he's not going to do that. He said he's not going to do that. Fair. So how are you going to do it? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy to accept because it's such famous faces in such iconic roles, like you said. Like, it's so hard to separate the actors from the
You know,
characters.
I hate to say this, I'm going to shit on it, but I'm not going to shit on it. But I remember when again, I'm going to mention it again.
Dial of Destiny.
No. When Resurrections came out, that's all I'm going to say. You had people going, I can't believe I'm making a Matrix film. I can't believe I'm making I remember watching the original, and to me, I'm like, why can't you just accept that you're making a film and let it be it? Don't try and connect it to this tissue of being compared to its original. And the first thing that people are going to say, I can see it now in the Vox Box. I loved it. Adam Driver's already doing it. What do you think of Heat? What do you think of Michael Mann's? I love Heat. Oh, it's the pinnacle of his career. Yeah, I love it. Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, I love it. And then when the set photos come out and people are working on set, people are going, I can't believe I'm like working with Michael Mann on Heat 2. What a privilege. And it will always come down to trying to evoke the idea of going back to the original. That's why they're all there. And granted, it's lovely to do that. And I would, as a person who would love to be involved in those projects, that'd be amazing, because you're there. But you have to sort of love the passion of what you're making now. You're making a new film that, yes, has tissue to other stuff, but really open up that and enjoy it. Like, I made a film with Michael Mann. It's amazing. But they will revert to Heat all the time. And for me, it's like it then becomes so biased. You constantly like cognitively think of the previous entry. Then you always subconsciously comparing them. And now because of sequels, you have to contextually pair them. It's just it's murky for me. But I was just wondering what you thought, Carson, about a director like that. Then you'll have loads, I'm sure.
I love them all, but all mine are like winning. I was really trying to think of it, and like I think it's also the beneficial that like genuinely I am a little bit younger, and a lot of my people I follow are younger. It's like, but I just think like I don't know, none of mine are like dying and old, and like I mean Ridley Scott is winning, right?
Yeah,
like I'm fine. So Schrader is still killing it, arguably more than ever before. So like I'm really
you're
fine.
even good. You're just shitting on
I will
us,
say though, if you are talking about supporting cast, that Resurrections comparison is stupid, and you know it. But other than that.
Have to say something about it, don't I will say this as well, right?
Sure.
And I'm not gonna. I know I'm talking all over, but I feel like I don't think we'll get an option to talk about Michael Mann for a while after this, so I'm gonna have to go full head. It is interesting, and I'm not trying to read into the material here. And I know someone's already shit on this, and he's called Nick. But don't you think it's very interesting that, consciously or not, Michael Mann is suffering with the namesake of being Michael Mann and audience expectations of him as a person, how to create a product. And he's making a film about a man struggling with the identity of who he is and what the name means, trying to create a secondary product in order to get back into a market that is densely populated by other rivals who are faster, louder, brighter. Doesn't it just add a little bit more poetic blossom to watching this experience for anyone? Doesn't it? I can see.
I did this with Oppenheimer. I can't do this again with
both
Ferrari.
just, like,
Sorry.
slowly shaking their heads. It's just so interesting to look at that vision for me, and I can't help but try and romanticize that as being an adequate and accurate depiction of what he's trying to do here. I don't think it is. I think they're just common courtesies of putting one and one together and getting 9. But it's interesting how I see that. Perhaps I'm shooting at my arse here, but just trying to give it a bit more flavor.
A third theory always comes back in one way or another.
First, he tried to find the 5 stars with 9/11. Now he's turned to this. I don't know what next.
Yeah, probably would. Yeah, I'm not going to go any more into that.
Well, I think that kind of is probably wrapping us up on our Ferrari review. I don't know if anyone has final thoughts. We can kind of go around. I will say a good film, not a great film. I have issues with it. I'm happy we got it. I'm happy like in my lifetime because genuinely we don't know if we'll get this chance again. I got to go see a new Michael Mann film. Outside of that, pretty okay. I don't know. I feel like if you are a huge Michael Mann stan, this will give you something. But I don't see why if you're a general audience member you have to rush to this. Though January is like so empty, you might as well if you're just looking for a theater experience. I guess the sound design's really good, so I'll give you that. Nick, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, definitely a movie that if you're going to watch it, just watch it in the cinema for the first time, because it's just not going to be the same on a loudspeaker at home. It's going to rock the foundations of your house. But yes, it's a very painfully lackluster narrative. I think it's just too much. It's too much and does very little with it. I think it should have focused on one or two aspects a bit more and removed the third one. Just there's three different stories going on here. Cut one out and just reshape it, which is a shame. But again, like I said, it's still like a good movie in terms of like the way it's the work that's behind it and a lot of the side actors. I like the casting here, generally speaking, even though Patrick Dempsey with white hair is just off-putting. It just felt so wrong, just so wrong. Um, but yes, it's just I think that's ultimately why I had it among my most disappointing movies of 2023 for ClapperCast for the year and discussion. It's because it's just okay. Like you watch it and you go like, yeah, it's fine, just like that with the squeaky voice included. But otherwise, it should have been great. It should have been Return to Form. It should have been a celebration of sorts. And instead, it wasn't. In a year that gave us so many of those moments, like holy shit, Fablemans, holy shit, Scorsese's back, yes. Oppenheimer, Barbie, like people love certain directors. It's like yes, they're back with new banger features, and we didn't get it with this. It's just like it hurts. It hurts.
Me with Saw 10, cinema's back.
Yeah, Soul
Jack,
10 is a better
what are
movie than Ferrari. It's more
Oh my god!
consistent.
hold on. Now we don't need to get into what I would put
Whoa!
Saw X above. Hold
Whoa!
on now,
Um,
because you're not wrong.
Shots fired.
well,
Jack, go for
I just sort of
it.
like
Your
shell
final
shocked there.
thoughts.
Like I
Tobin
think,
Bell plays
yeah,
Enzo Ferrari.
something hit me there.
Tobin
And
Bell is better than Adam Driver. Let's be clear, but
I need
go for
Jakub at my side here to sort of sense that bullshit out. I can't do with it. I like this film. I'm enamored with it. I thought this was a cinematic experience I really enjoyed. Categorically on that cinematic experience, I don't think this will travel very well. Much like Gravity, in a sense that you can watch it in a cinematic experience and watching it at home, and it's the same sort of product but viewed in a very different way. Granted, I think Gravity is a bit of a different example, but in the sense of being able to watch this at home, you would need a 5.1 surround sound, 7.1 or something just to blow you away. I'm sort of enamored with this as a venture. I waited 10 years for this. I had to wait, and this is a thing of mine. I had to wait almost 2 decades for a Matrix sequel that I didn't really expect I was gonna. I didn't really understand what I was going to get. Didn't really get what I was going to get, but it was enamored with the ideology behind it in a different way. I had to wait 14 years for an Unbreakable sequel that I didn't get to sort of experience in the right way, and then was blown away in the cinema when I realized it. And this is on those paths of witnessing something and being enamored with it, and different reasons of waiting for quite long. So I think the expectation has been met with what I expected this would be after Black Cat, and watching one of my favorite filmmakers make something deeply personal to them. I do subscribe to the identity of this film, exploring identity, exploring grief, exploring who you are, and understanding what you are. Perhaps not to other people's degrees of uniqueness, but I think there's something here. I think on a visual level, it sometimes can be incredibly striking. I think on an emotive level, it's here and then it's not, and then it's here. Again, I think that it has 3 sub stories that I found quite impacting on all 3. to a certain degree. I think they work quite well. Where we go from here, I don't know. But like Carson said, in 2023 or 2024, in fact, I watched it this morning, to go and watch a new Michael Mann movie, perhaps for the first and last time, in the cinema for me was majestic. It's the William Friedkin. I'm not going to try and say the title. It's just like a title. The Kane,
Mutiny,
the Kane,
Court,
the,
Marshall.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, there
the
you
Kane
go.
Court Mutiny, Marshall Mutiny, whatever it's called. But it's one of those ideas where you watch a film, and I hate doing it. I did it with Tony Scott as well, where I watched Unstoppable, and I was like, we're not going to watch another Tony Scott film, and I'm doing it with Ridley Scott at the moment. Just watch I've got Revenge to watch for Tony, and I've got the Thelma and Louise for Ridley, and then obviously Gladiator 2, and we'll see what else. It's those times where you watch something and you don't know if it's going to be the last time, and you're so enamored with these filmmakers, it's almost just a blessing in disguise to just watch these filmographies, and to watch Michael Mann's Ferrari. Sort of fell deeply in love with it. Maybe more so the idea, not necessarily the execution, but I think cinema is a very visceral event anyway. So I don't want anyone to sort of take that as a negative. Yeah, I really like this. It'd be interesting to watch this again, like you said, Carson, in a year. Watch it on my TV and with the lights on in the background where it lights up red and stuff, and maybe there's more to pick from this in a few years' time. But I sort of slowly, not falling in love with this, but I'm enamored with the idea of it, and it just makes me want to watch. Again, I watched Black Cat after this. Influence. I'm going to watch Miami Vice, the director's cut, and I'm probably going to watch Manhunter as well. And if a filmmaker can do that and exhibit those feelings of me wanting to explore their filmography, more power to them. So yeah, I really like this. I don't know if we do scores, but I think I'm going to probably shit a brick here. I'd probably give it a mid 4-star as well. Probably give it like mid 70s. It would drop. I'll say that. I think it would drop. Even talking about it here on a theoretical level, on a cinematic level, and on a human level as well, it definitely has. It teeters. But we've been here. We've done this before with Black Cat, Miami Vice, and Public Enemies, and we all go back to them. Some of us more than others, and find something new. So maybe I'll in a year's time we'll come back and it'll be on our rapid reviews. I don't know, but yeah, I'm just glad that we got to see a Michael Mann movie again. That's as good as I can say.
Yeah. I think that is a very big, important thing to say. And I think we're all pretty big overall Mann fans, whether or not you like Ferrari or not, which I think is a good transition to our question of the week, where we're asking, what is our favorite Michael Mann film? A big filmography. Some people think he only has one good film, I guess, but I don't think any of us are in that boat.
No.
Jack, you're the
that's
stand.
evil.
You can take it. And also, let me be clear. I want one film for every person. I don't want everyone listing the 5 good films he has, being like, it's one of these. Just give me one film that you pick,
too well.
we'll move on.
Okay, well that's actually fucking evil to do that, because I knew you, because we were talking about this on Slack and you were like, that's gonna be the question of the day, and I read it. I was like, you bastard, right? Well, it isn't Ferrari. Oh, this is tough. I'm going to be quite definitive here. I'm not going to say the film everyone thinks as well. I'm going to go different. Let's have a look. Oh,
Struggling. I can see the sweat on his brow.
Yeah, I'm in a Michael Mann film now. Al Pacino's what else? Fucking, I hope you two are struggling more than I am. This is dead air.
I got mine ready. I did my homework.
I'm not going for the 4-letter one. That's
it,
just cheap. That, and if you do that, I'll fall out of you. You can't do that. You can't.
Anyway, my
things.
favorite is Collateral.
Right? Yeah. Right. Okay.
I think it was the first. I don't want to say it's the first time I became aware of Michael Mann. Like, I'd seen The Insider, I'd seen Ali. It sounds weird. Those are the first 2 that I watched of his. But then I saw Collateral. I was like, holy wow, okay, this is special. And it's a movie that stuck with me. I must have seen it like 4 or 5 times since like 2013, 2014. And it's outstanding. I think it's one of my favorite Tom Cruise performances. I think the screenplay is tight, more so than like any other of his movies. It's just so well written. The dialogue, the parallels, the symbolism, the metaphors, all of that. Underrated supporting turn by Mark Ruffalo and Javier Bardem as well. Jada Pinkett Smith's pretty good. It's just such an easy movie to put on and watch. He has a lot of those movies, but just Collateral. Yo, homie, that's my briefcase. poo poo. That's it. Just so raw. It's so raw without getting lost into like the tactical nature of something like Miami Vice or even Black Hat. Where it's like, oh, all the action is like so clean, just that crisp digital look that's also mixed with film. Collateral. It's hard because, as I said before, there are others, but Collateral is like, if I had to pick just one forever, I'm a Cruise head at the end of the day, so Cruise. That's the extra points.
Is that Ted Cruz? That one, is it?
Jesus.
I'm getting into that
For
keyword
me-
stuff, guys. Come on. I can't go next. You're gonna
I
have to go
see
first.
on your review schedule that you have Sound of Freedom on there. Is
Yeah,
all I will
let's
say.
just not go. We'll get to that one.
For me, I'm gonna go Manhunter. I think
Nice.
Manhunter is like such an excellent bottle of intensity that builds and builds and builds. Even the action at the end. I was reading some reviews and people were like, "Oh, it's kind of underwhelming." For me, like the style of it, I don't know, it works for me. I think that's just like from start to finish a really perfect feature with some excellent performances. I really love Manhunter, so I'll stake my claim there.
Inagada de
Right,
Vida.
I'm not going to
that
go back
leaves
on this
one.
because you've just reminded me of something I don't like about Ferrari. On every one of these films, this person can end on a fucking banger of a song. It's almost ethereal to listen to. Miami Vice does it. Last Amigos, Public Enemies does it. Heat does it with Moby, The Insider. Ferrari is the one occasion where I was waiting for that Mogwai auto rock, just something to give me some substance, and he doesn't do it, and it was horrific. Right, I'm not going to go along very far. There's four that's really annoying me here. Really annoying me. But you've got to give me something. You've mentioned two films. I'm not going to say Collateral. I'm not going to say Manhunter, although they were there. There's four. I have personal connections to these films. That really annoy me. Right, I'm gonna give you number one, but I have to cheat. Give me this.
Okay,
Right,
valid, fine.
right. I've always adored The Insider because nothing happens in that film, yet everything happens in it. It's paranoia to 11. And what Nick said about Ted Cruz in Collateral, I say the exact same thing for Russell Crowe. It's like so out of character, and especially the same year as Gladiator's fucking crazy. Public Enemies, there's something about that film I just fuck with. I love it. Francesca's my sister's favourite film was Last of the Mohicans. I've got something there, especially with the score. Lisa Gerrard was back in this as well. I don't know if you both noticed that. Yes,
In
we're going through
Ferrari?
it. Yes.
I don't.
When he goes to the crash site, she sings. She does. Definitely. Or it's probably a pre-issue of Elliot Goldfall's score that he's used. I'm going to go for number one, right? And I'm going to re-review this tonight. I've already mentioned it, but this is my number one. This is my number one. Because I can taste this film. I've been in nightclubs where I've smelt things. I've smelt blood. I've smelt sweat. I've smelt cigarettes. I've smelt other things, and I can taste this film. I can smell the Miami air. I can smell the residue of gunshots. I can feel the pain. I can feel the nights or the early dusk mornings waking up when night's fading and you're in a hotel room. Everything's glass. The water's there. This director's cut of Miami Vice is my favorite film of Michael Mann. That film fucks, and on every level, it's hot, it's sexy, it smells amazing, it's textured, it's internal, it's external. How long could these things? It could never last. Colin Farrell has never probably looked good in the Armani pants and the loafers. Jamie Foxx is egotistical, but it works. You can tell they don't like each other, but there's a sense of like fulfillment there. Naomi Harris is in there. Eddie Marsan, Kieran Hines. Oh my god! When they go to when they have like the soundtrack, Nano Point in their head tonight. When does it end? Auto Rock by Mogwai is amazing in it. Doom, 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 doom. That's Miami Vice. It's everything that encapsulates Miami Vice, especially the mid 2000s as well. The director's cut when it opens up with the speedboats. He should never have opened up in the nightclub.
I'll say Maxis and Vincent, who is going to be on this episode, also agrees with you. This was his pick, and he wanted me to pass it on.
Yeah.
Sadly, he had to drop out because we had a delay for a bit.
But that would have gone on for too long.
He agrees. Yeah. So with that, man, thank you for a new film. You can check out Ferrari in theaters now if you've not already. Let's get to our rapid reviews. Everything we've seen recently. that we've not covered in very brief, short, digestible chunks. Nick, you can start us off. What have you seen recently?
Super rapid fire. The curse is almost over. Just amazing. Just 2 episodes to go, Carson. Just 2 episodes. I don't know what's gonna happen. It gives me a heart attack, like just a panic attack every time I watch it. But very briefly, like over the holidays, I caught up with a lot of movies. The only ones that are like worth mentioning, in my opinions, Fallen Leaves, delightful. The Holdovers, delightful. Saltburn, enjoyable. With
Right, calm it down.
I have problems. I'm not gonna get into them because we're gonna be
Good.
here for 5 hours. But I did enjoy it. I'll say that. It's like it was very watchable, which is a plus, to be honest. Boys Afraid, surprise, like snuck into my top favorites of the year. Carson loves it.
That's us done. That's us done tonight.
Great film. What else? I rewatched The Batman. The Batman's pretty good, It's always like, oh shit, this holds up. Blackberry holds up. I saw The Boy and the Heron in the cinema. Oh, first Miyazaki. Like, that's something we were talking about, like older filmmakers getting the chance to see their movies in the cinema. Like watching my first Miyazaki on the big screen, I was like, oh, it's so good. Such a good film. Such a good film. And lastly, I watched Maestro as well in May, December. Maestro was all right. It's just like, could have been great. Could have been great. It's not. May, December, I really liked it. I didn't love it. It's like one of those movies I kept waiting for the moment where it would be like, holy shit, it's so good. It just came shy of it. But just on a purely intellectual level, I really loved it. But for me, cinema is like, gotta feel it here in the chest, emotionally, viscerally, like the good Michael Mann movies, as we mentioned. Just something you feel here in the heart and in your soul. And May, December, I never felt it here. I always felt it here, which is, still good, but yeah. Those are mine.
Love it.
Oh no,
Jack,
and
what have
Gen
you
V.
seen
Sorry, I
recently?
forgot. Gen V, the boys TV show.
Oh,
I
right.
binged it in 2.5 days. I really enjoyed it. I was not expecting it. I do like the boys, don't love it. It's like it's all right, but the Gen V is like, it's cute. It's very cute. That's it. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Nice.
I've been trying to watch the latest stuff of directors, and then I watch a lot of the old stuff to try and get my filmography done. So I watched. I had to go miles away to watch this, but I went to go watch Silent Night, John Woo film, which I thought was interesting. I thought it was very mid tier, but that's an interesting one. John Woo and Michael Mann are very. I find eerily similar in leaving Hollywood and coming back and trying to make a Hollywood film. It's very interesting. But then I watched his Just Heroes, which was interesting. Aquaman 2, I don't want to talk about that. Theatre Camp, I blew me away. I loved it. I saw it.
Nice.
I saw it twice in 2 days. Loved it. Anatomy of Fall. I can't understand why people want to sort of dignify that with a 5-star rating when it's essentially just absolute platonic atmosphere. So everything in that film is platonic. Although the dog Snoopy is amazing, and the child actor played by a kid called Milo is outstanding. I watched Wes Anderson. I don't know why. I watched Wes Anderson's roll down Netflix things. Like, whatever. What a waste of my time. I had to go quite far to watch these next two. I watched Dream Scenario with Nicolas Cage. I don't know what people are not seeing in that film. I thought it was genuinely amazing. I think he's amazing in it. I think you nailed it in your review, Nick, on Letterboxd about that's essentially a subtextual analysis of cancel culture. Him going to France like Kevin Spacey. I think it's like so interesting.
And Woody Allen.
Yeah, exactly. That was so interesting. I watched Priscilla, the Sophie Coppola thing.
Hey.
That would be interesting to talk about for like 2 hours. I think Sophie Coppola said that like there was scenes cut out of the screenplay because she couldn't get the backing to do it. I think those are sequences that would undoubtedly have helped that film, Tyler. It's a very cold film, but it's also a malicious one, so it sort of works. But I just thought it was good, but not great. I'm going to pair that up with Marie Antoinette if I can. Probably watch that with someone I know. Don't want to watch that on my own, just because. Oh no, Virgin Suicide. Sorry, because that might be too grim to watch on my own. But I did watch Jericho Mile in preparation for this, which I thought was fucking really interesting. Looking at the political underbelly of his work, especially that was made for TV and then was sold to cinema. Fucking really interesting to look at that. And now Ferrari, they work on very strange wavelengths, but they sort of intertwined. I did watch Pi, Darren Aronofsky's directorial debut, in prep for The Whale. It was very, very good. I can't understand also why people don't see that as a film that undoubtedly questions, and we're going to get into stuff here, but mental illness and conspiracy, how they're conjoined, and how the brain works, and ultimately what we're seeing now with the QAnon stuff and Pizzagate, and how people grapple into these to have purpose. Very interesting.
It's a good film, yeah.
Yeah, watch Tony Scott's Taking of Pelham 123. Thought that was outstanding. Yeah,
Yes.
I watched Spy Game as well, so I thought, fuck it, I'll put that on for my parents. Right, but I did watch some Jackie Chan movies in January because that's like, I may need to rename that because I copied the list off someone and then didn't rename it. But I've been watching Police Story, the first one, and Mr. Nice Guy, and I've just been watching The Protector, but I didn't get to finish it. They're interesting films because the UK dubs are strange, and we don't get a lot of theatrical versions of those films. We get altered cuts. So I've always thought that First Strike was just its only film. It was like 87 minutes or 82 minutes. It's actually Police Story 4.
Oh,
yeah. So, and that's 107 minutes. So I'm catching up on stuff like that. And then, I watched Black Cat in prep for this. Then I watched the director's cut by Arrow Video because I felt that obviously we watched the bootleg version of the director's cut. So I watched the Arrow release. I thought it was good. I thought it was very good. I think it's definitely a 4-star film. I felt it was very much like this, in a sense of like being enamored with it. Perhaps there's stuff being poorly cast in there, maybe, but I think it works. It's violent. I love the ending to it. I love how it looks. I love how he's doing like the Oliver Stone Snowden thing to directors trying to be enamored with the digital age, but not be completely infatuated with it. It's very interesting to see how they identify it. Like Scorsese did with The Wolf of Wall Street. It's just interesting to see directors of a certain, not necessarily demographic, but age, look at contemporary issues. Granted, within context, obviously, stuff, people who are assholes with money usually assholes with money throughout time, but digital age is very interesting, and that's really it. I've got a lot to get over. I've got some. I'm watching One Life, Night Swim, and Anyone But You in the cinema this week if I can be asked. I'm going to watch Eileen if I can do. Because I'm going to review that for Clapper, the Audi vs Lancia movie. I'll get to that. But I've got a lot. I've got Godzilla to watch, May, December. Society of Snow, I've got to watch for Clapper as well. I've heard mid things. Maestro yet to watch. Holdovers, Bo's Afraid, Carson's Favourite, and Bones and All. And also The Whale and the Fablemans I'm going to try watch in the next couple of weeks. I know that wasn't rapid. I do apologise. It being horrific this episode. So just send all the hate mail to me. Sorry, Carson.
You're good. We're finally done with 2023, which means I've seen a lot of the like December releases. I saw Ava DuVernay's Origin, which I thought was really inspired. Definitely like it reads like a Carson Tamar thesis paper where it's very, very ambitious and it tries to have this really large narrative. And there's a point in the film where a character literally is like, as a character is like describing basically what the film is about. And they're like, I'm not sure if I see the connection, but if you make me see it, I would really value it. And I don't think the film ever fully makes you see the connection, but like it does feel like there's something worthwhile it's getting at. Kind of happy Max isn't here because he loved Rebel Moon Part 1. I'm just saying I'm happy I took it off the ClapperCast schedule because that thing was atrocious. Aquaman was not good, but I will say genuinely the joy I felt leaving that theater knowing the DCEU is dead. I never have to do it again. It's over, everyone.
Did you clap?
Cheers. I clapped, I cheered, I did a shot as I left, all the good stuff. Anyone But You, I'm a little confused why everyone is so angry at this film because it's never once promoted itself as being anything but being a dumb rom-com, and it definitely is a fun, dumb rom-com. I also saw Silent Night. I will say over the holidays, there was one day where I went through a really emotionally bad time. So I double featured My Neighbor Totoro as just joy. And then I was like, I want to just go see some dumb violence and action. So I watched Silent Night. And maybe it was because I was like sobbing during it, but I hated the film. I thought it was absolutely atrocious. What a dumb concept that never works. Not for me, but also I don't like John Woo in general. So like I'm a ClapperCast girly. Again, I'm not part of the Uncut Gems universe. So take that how you will. And then just as a joy, because every once in a while, and it was the new year and there really wasn't anything to watch. And every once in a while, I'll just be like, I want to watch a shark attack movie. So I watched The Shallows for the first time.
Huh?
And I must say, kind of blown away. Normally when I get that urge, I am like, the film is absolute garbage and it's awful and terrible. This film is not perfect. I think especially the third act, it ends kind of rapidly. But how they use the shark, how they use the drama, how they use the filmmaking, the cinematography, the visuals, I was kind of like stunned by this. If you are in the mood ever just to watch some like shark violence and you haven't seen this, I think the director behind it, I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name. He has a very weird filmography, but like most of the time does feel like he works for me.
Is it the
I
Liam
weirdly
Neeson
found
guy?
Jungle Cruise. Yes, he did Jungle Cruise, which I thought was entertaining enough. But The Shallows, I think, is his best film, probably from what I've seen. Just very impressive
Black
stuff.
Adam.
So that will be mine. Well, we don't need to mention, hey, DCEU dead. It can't hurt me anymore. Yeah, so that's my rapid reviews. And I think that does it for the episode. Thank you both for coming on. Happy New Year. With
Hey.
this, we are done with award season, which means on ClapperCast we're done with new releases until like March, unless something changes with the release schedule. It's kind of shit coming out between now and March and like Dune 2. So we're going to take this time to look at old films and old shows and old pieces of media from filmmakers who we haven't really had a chance to talk about in the podcast, but definitely deserve a place here. So I'm excited to get into, some John Waters. I'm excited to get into just a lot of very interesting, fun filmmakers. I'm not going to spoil it all for everyone, but I think it's going to be very, very fun and inspired few months on the podcast, including next month where we do a couple episodes for my birthday, which I'm excited about. So with that, where can we find you guys on social media? Nick?
You can find me on X and Blue Sky and Instagram. Now you can find me in all the socials, just NickyGround97 or Nicolò Grasso. Just super easy to find, even on Letterboxd. And you can follow also my YouTube and Vimeo pages at Enjoy the Movies. And you can also follow the Clapper Instagram account, which is officially revitalized, back from the dead, up to date with all the new reviews. I'm going to put a nice little post about the Clapper Awards nominations, so check it out.
Love it. Clapper Awards where Saltburn is nominated for at least one award on there. Jack, where can you find you on social media?
Just blank that one. You can find me on Twitter, and I can't stop thinking about that film as well, which is really starting to fuck me off now because it's really annoying me. It's everywhere. And then I said in my review that the reasons why it's getting picked up is a detriment to its exactly what it's trying to say and it's exactly what it's happened. So that film can go fuck itself.
They played Murder on the Dance Floor in the gym. They never played it for the past 2 years.
That's just because Sophie it does have that energy and she does strut that shit. So fair play to her. She's getting some flowers for once because she's doing M&S adverts now here. So I don't know what that says. It's like like Nicole Kidman doing ANC adverts. There may be a fall from grace. I don't know. See how you will, but you can find me on Letterboxd and Twitter with the same usernames at Jak-Luke Sharp. It's just my name. But yeah, follow Clapper on Letterboxd. We're revamping that just because there's been no time really to do it. And Cassin's doing the ClapperCast. Jakob's doing Uncut Gems. Nick's doing the Instagram. So it's going to be an interesting 2024. But like Carson said, just to echo, I've seen a few bits and pieces we're doing on here for 2024, and it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of conversation about stuff, which I'm eagerly anticipating, but also hotly becoming slightly scared about what direction we're going to talk about stuff in, because there's a lot of very interesting theoretical, philosophical, romanticized pieces we're looking at, and it couldn't look like a better lineup just to talk about film. So yeah, well done, Carson, for organising this year. You've done a brilliant job. I'm always honoured to be back on here. I'm sure Nick is, although he's shaking his head. He's not, I'm joking. But yeah, well done to you both as well. I love being on this. I hope people listen, even if I'm allowed to ramble. Carson allows that, and I'm not looking at the wall, screaming and shouting. So thank you very much for having me again, because it's been a wonderful year with you as well.
I appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky, just Carson Tamar. Again, thank you so much for listening. What Jack says, I extend to everyone who listens, everyone who probably hate watches because they think we're going to gush about Saltburn and then we hate it. It means a lot to be able to come on here, talk about film, to have Ferrari that could have just been a film that was in and out of the mind and have a 2-hour conversation on it, and feel like I understand Mann and understand my opinions on Ferrari so much better. It is really worthwhile. So I hope everyone sticks with us through this year. And I think it's going to be a very fun year on the podcast. So with that, thank you so much. Goodbye.